Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. I shouldn't say and. I should say or good
Or,
evening.
yeah, well, I
Or
mean,
it could be and. I
yeah,
don't know.
it
Who
could be.
knows, right?
We're probably
That's
going to go
right.
long enough that it will span between the afternoon and the evening for some people.
Or
Yeah.
anybody listening to it could be doing it,
True,
at
very true.
11:30 at night. That's true. This is the Silmarillion Film Project, in case you're wondering where you landed. And I'm Trish Lambert, one of the co-hosts, along with co my host co-host, Corey Olson, the Tolkien professor, and we're still minus Dave Kale, but for very good reasons.
That's right. Wait, in
Because,
fact, ready?
oh, you got the picture? Good.
Uh-huh. There we go.
There she
There
is.
is the reason that Dave is
Oh
not
my
with
goodness.
us tonight.
Aw.
Actually, the reason Dave's not with us tonight is because he's actually got the oldest son
Yeah.
bedtime duty.
Yeah.
So, but
Doing
that's
the-
sort
doing-
of indirectly. Yeah.
Right, exactly. Doing the dad
Look
thing.
at that little chunk. She is
I
a
know.
chunk.
Yeah, I mean that is a plump newborn right there.
Wow.
When you've got
That
the
is
like the
amazing.
elbow folds at birth,
Yeah.
like you're handling the body weight right there. That's some
Wow.
good stuff.
Poor Teresa.
Yeah. So yes, Matilda Jane
But it's
Kale,
Yes. Matilda
born on
Jane Kale.
Halloween. So yeah,
Born on Halloween.
Yeah.
That'll be with her the rest of her life, won't it?
absolutely.
Halloween baby. So Dave said that he is committed to doing December, which is big of him because what do we have, like 2 episodes in December?
One or two, yeah. It's all right. It's okay. It'll be good to have him back for
That's
whenever
true.
we can get him.
True.
Absolutely.
So you can just leave this picture up so it's like Dave's with us.
That's right. That's right. Dave's with us during the intros here. Yeah, excellent. So tonight we're returning to our scripts again. We're planning to talk about episodes 8 and 9. This is the big episode where we're talking about the Dagor Aglareb, or getting to the Dagor Aglareb tonight. And been looking forward to this discussion for several weeks now. As most of you probably know, there has been some difference of opinion among our team as a whole about how to handle the Dagor Aglareb. So we're going to be discussing some of those issues here tonight. First, quick announcements. The most urgent one, of course, is Baymouth. We're having Baymouth out in Berkeley, California on the 23rd of November. So that is, for those listening live, next Saturday. That is Saturday week. And it's going to be really cool. We had, this is our second Baymouth. We had Baymouth last year. It was a wonderful time. So really looking forward to seeing folks again. The registration is still open for that. I encourage people to sign up. If you're anywhere in the San Francisco Bay Area, come and join us. Definitely. We do. That will be the last regional moot of 2019. We will be kicking off the 2020, the very prolific 2020 regional moot season, regional moot year with Tex Moot on February 8th down in Houston, Texas. The Tex Moot team, this is going to be our third Tex Moot, and they've been sort of rotating it around the state of Texas. It was in Fort Worth the first year, and then down in Waco last year, and now we're down in Houston this year. So that's going to be cool.
And do you think it would be an attraction or a detraction if I say that I'm delivering the keynote at
Well,
that?
I was gonna say that. Yes, exactly. Yeah, Trish is gonna be delivering the keynote at Tex Moot. I am really excited about that.
I'm still thinking about it, because the theme is dystopia, and I don't tend to be a dystopian type person, but I've got some really good ideas. So
Yeah,
you gotta come.
Looking forward to it.
fun.
That's going to be great. Yeah, absolutely. Mythmoot 7, of course, is coming up. Mythmoot 7, for crying out loud. Wow. And that's going to be on the 27th through the 30th of June in 2020. The registration for that actually is going to be where we are coming closer to opening registration, starting our early bird registration for Mythmoot 7. So that's going to be cool. And of course, we have registration continuing to be ongoing for our spring 2020 classes. So you can find out more information on all of these things at signumuniversity.org. All right. So, we're again, if you want to find the scripts yourself, and again, I've been saying this, and I'm going to carry on saying this. If you get a chance to read or even just skim over these scripts that we're doing, not only will our conversation make more sense, but it will be a real treat, because these scripts are a lot of fun. I have had a wonderful time reading and rereading these scripts. I think I've read them all twice now, actually, that we've done so far. And I've been really enjoying reading them and discussing them. So you can find them on the Silm Film Project discussion forum at forums.signumuniversity.org, and then go to Script Season 4 and Scripts and Script Outlines for Season 4, and you can find the text of all of our of our scripts there. So tonight we are up to Episode 8, which is Bottomless Dread. Of course, that phrase comes from the Book of Lost Tales. The spell of bottomless dread is it's actually one of the initial concepts. So the spell of bottomless dread is first discussed in the Fall of Gondolin, the old Fall of Gondolin, which was, of course, one of the first stories, one of the first age stories that Tolkien wrote. So it's from one of the very earliest of the Middle-earth stories, and it really, when you read it in the older version, which of course now everyone can do much more conveniently in the new Fall of Gondolin book that came out recently, but when you read the old Book of Lost Tales version, one of the things that's really striking is that the spell of bottomless dread is like almost like a framing mechanism, right? I mean, Gondolin, the story of the Fall of Gondolin begins with Gondolin as like the one haven of peace remaining, while Morgoth has pretty much taken over all of the rest of the land, and all of the rest of like what happened there and what the progress of that was and what went into that is very vague, because again, he hadn't written any of it yet, right? So when he first writes the Fall of Gondolin, as I say, one of the earliest of the stories, he just begins with that essential premise, right? The land is covered in darkness. And one of the key elements of that darkness that he talks about is the spell of bottomless dread, which Morgoth is able to cast upon the elves, or many of the elves, who are unable to escape to Gondolin. So we kind of resurrected the phrase and to some extent the concept of the spell of bottomless dread when we were discussing this season earlier on in our discussions, and so anyway, so I'm really excited about doing that, and I think that it's I think it's pretty cool, and let me just say at the very beginning, before we start talking about the details of Episode 8, that I really admire, acknowledge, that's not a strong enough word. I recognize how challenging, I think, my guess, and Rhiannon and Marie and Nick, who are of course joining us again. I meant to introduce you guys before, but I think I forgot. Anyway, Marie and Nick and Rhiannon are joining us again tonight. You guys can correct me if I'm wrong about this, but it seems like Episode 8 must have been really hard to write. I would have found it really hard to write.
Yes.
I mean, was that super challenging? Because I think it must have been really challenging.
The Angband-centric episode
in particular
is maybe necessary in that we kind of do need to see what's happening with our villains, but it is a step away from what we've been doing with the story for the rest of the season. So this is like a unique standalone episode in many ways. Yeah. It is very different in its context, in a way. Rhiannon, what are some of the things, again, just kind of speaking generally, things that you found most challenging about Episode 8?
I think probably the most challenging thing was figuring out how to depict the spell of bottomless dread. Mm-hmm. There was a ton of discussion about this on the forums, and lots of people had different ideas about it, and tons of people were posting like these little clips from different shows or different movies showing like what they thought it might possibly look like. And I kind of didn't really exactly go with any of them. What I did was, I don't have the book on me at the moment, but in the Book of Lost Tales, it talks about the elves who have had the spell of bottomless dread placed on them feel the burn of Morgoth's eyes at every moment, or something like that.
Yeah.
So that's why I wanted to show, like, when you see the camera shooting through Ethelos's point of view, she sees her friends and family, but they have Morgoth's eyes.
Right. Yeah, I remember that passage from the Book of Lost Tales. I could tell, I could feel like that you were really trying to sort of stick to that, to represent that, and it's so hard because it's actually a really classic example of one of those things that's easy to say in prose, right? But really hard to depict without, again, just doing some kind of without doing something like a voiceover or something like that, right? I mean, that's really challenging. So we'll dig in. Let's dig in and talk about some of these details. But anyway, I just wanted to acknowledge at the beginning that this episode, I think, was really challenging, especially the Angband bits. Okay, so we start this episode with the capture of Diriel, right?
Right.
So we have we had our first captive back in episode 6, right, when Ethelos is taken by Tevildo, and we get Diriel, wife of Curufin, captured at the beginning of this episode.
Right. And there probably were additional elves that were captured with Etelos. There are probably elves who have been captured in between those times. So this is the first one that we're showing, the second one that we're showing.
Yes.
One of the tough things about this one were to get Diriel into a place where she could get captured, but also to have her captured in a way that somebody else knows that it's happened. Right.
Yeah, exactly. No, I could tell that there's a certain it was some careful choreography that was going on there, right, with Celebrimbor and Diriel in the tunnels there at the beginning. But I thought that worked reasonably well. Was made more poignant, right? Because we already had one, like Orodreth has already found out remotely, right? Like, by the way, Mom was captured and she's in Angband now, right?
Yeah.
To have this one be sort of more proximate.
They don't really know exactly what happened to her. She's just gone.
She's captured.
Right.
Or something. Right. Maybe eaten for all they know. Yeah.
They didn't find her body, so they presumed she was captured.
Right.
And we had already done the whole, the way that we separated Angrod and Etelos, right? We couldn't do that again exactly like that. We had to find a way to have this group out there, but have people get separated off in a different way.
Yeah.
So we weren't leaning on the same thing twice.
Yeah. No, I like that. I thought that the capture of Diriel worked pretty well. And by the way, so you were talking about needing an occasion or like circumstances under which they were captured. I liked that they were on a mining expedition, right, and they were captured there, which is nice, nicely foreshadowing Maiglin, right, which is cool,
right.
So I liked the foreshadowing of Maiglin's capture. I thought that was neat.
And then we had to get, in order to get the ban and the reaction to the ban, right, we had to now be telling this additional story, right? We have to be telling that story of what happens when that news gets out.
Right.
And so we felt that Orodreth, being somebody that we could put together with Celebrimbor, because of their shared experience, would be somebody that could have been sent as a messenger to Maedhros to let him know about the ban. And he happens to arrive at the same time that Celebrimbor is bringing back news of his mother's capture or apparent capture.
Right. And what I also really liked about that is you can see Orodreth's private motive, right? He's he's volunteered to come and convey. I mean, clearly among many of the Noldor, right, the job of telling the Sons of Feanor about the ban by Thingol, right, would probably not have people wouldn't be queuing up for that job, you would think, right? No. But Orodreth jumps at it because he wants to go to talk to Maedhros. Like, so let's talk about escaped captives from Angband, Maedhros, right? I want a first-hand view of this, and if anyone can help me, you could, right? And so I thought that was great.
Yeah, and if somebody could, and if he could conceivably talk somebody into like a rescue op,
right?
Like who better? Like the Feanorians have got to be like first up for that, right?
And Maedhros in particular, absolutely. Oh, and by the way, Rhiannon was the on the one hand and on the other hand thing your idea? Was that
yes.
you? Oh, I loved that. That was hilarious. I loved that when so for those of you who didn't read it yet, so Maedhros is saying, like on the one hand, he's like, on the one hand I did get, he holds out his left hand and he's like, on the one hand I did get rescued, and then he's like, and on the other hand, and he holds out his stump. It was fantastic. I loved it.
Yeah. It's not quite if it's what passes for a joke for Maedhros, I think.
Yeah.
Because it's not really a joke.
No, but it's like gallows humor, right? I mean, and that seems perfectly fair from him. Yeah, it's it's not like he was making light of his condition, but it was. I thought that was
I don't think that Maedhros is above using his missing hand to make people feel uncomfortable.
No, and yet also not like necessarily taking like himself completely seriously all the time. I mean, like it's he doesn't have to be just totally grim all the time. I thought that was fun. I mean, he's not going to be like a jokester, right? I mean, he's not. We don't want to. Obviously, we couldn't push him too far in that direction.
Right.
But
for a Feanorian, he has enough humility to actually make himself a joke.
Yes.
In a small, minor way. He still has the pride of the Feanorians.
Absolutely.
But
absolutely
not to the same level as his brothers.
Because I agree, that like, yes, it's easy to talk about, his like intensity and his desire for revenge and his hatred of Morgoth and everything that have been intensified by his experience. But I agree with you, Marie. I think that higher than average humility for a Feanorian is likely to be, in Maedhros, one of the consequences of his captivity. Or anyway, that seems to me a very plausible one, especially given that we see Maedhros is going to, the kind of insights that Maedhros is going to have before his death, and his, like, the kinds of things that he's going to be saying by the very end, show that he has gone much further down the path of humility than like Celegorm and Curufin do, for instance, right?
Right. Speaking of pride and humility, we also get to revisit the Gothmog Sauron rivalry in this episode.
Yes.
Because we want to make sure that we remind people that that's still a thing, that they, that the forces of evil are not this kind of unified, homogenous group.
Yes. And that, like, by definition, like, being the bad guys, that means they don't play well together, right? I mean, unless your will is enslaved by your master, like, you're not like cooperative. Like, they're not a fun team bound together by mutual affection and desire to cooperate. So yeah, no, absolutely. That I think that was good, and providing the opportunity. It was Morgoth's return from the east, right? Certainly provides a good opportunity to again sort of spotlight the difference between Gothmog and Sauron and their different methods. Gothmog is able to get in a few digs at Sauron's expense, but it seems quite clear, and that Morgoth is going to get what Sauron is doing.
Right.
And
I'll tell you one thing on this, and that's that it sure would be a shame if there winds up not being any payoff to the rivalry between Sauron and Gothmog. I'm just going to plant that seed there. Anyway,
I wonder what that would look like.
I have a plan, but we can talk about that on another seed.
I thought you might. I thought you might. Yeah.
But
we all know how Gothmog dies. We
yes
can work out if Sauron has something to do with that.
Right. Right.
So additionally, we also need to show what the norm is for the prisoners, like what their life looks like, you know. So we had to kind of visit General Pop in Angband, essentially, to see how these people are living. You get like a little confrontation between Edalas and Diriel, because Edalas can't really trust anybody at this point.
Right.
You know.
Right. And that, by the way, seemed to me the contrast between Diriel and Edalas was really interesting. You know, it was a really good way to be able to emphasize what has been done to Edalas already, right? Because she's her reactions, the contrast with, you know, having the two of them were a really good kind of counterpoint to each other.
Right.
There.
Right. And Diriel is certainly more pragmatic in a way, and that was one of the things that we wanted to do, was not to make her choice to go along to serve them, her captors, willingly.
Right.
Not to have that be a choice merely based in cowardice.
Right. Absolutely.
But one of pragmatism, because she certainly can't accomplish anything if she's been spell of bottomless dreaded, you know.
Right. Yes.
It makes me think of, and I kind of, when we were discussing, I kind of brought up, like in prisoner of war camps in Germany, you know, the British or American officers, the one who was the highest ranking would generally be in charge of the prisoners, and we would act as liaison between the prisoners and the Germans. And by default, that meant, because they were going to have a lot of contact with the Germans, that meant that they couldn't be involved in any escape attempts. Now, I don't know if have you ever seen The Great Escape?
I haven't.
Film from the 60s. Oh man, it's amazing.
Yeah.
It's like one of the best films about World War II ever made, in my opinion. Anyway, but they can't be involved in the escape attempt really, because they're a liability. You know, because they're going to be and they have to be able to honestly speak to the Germans and treat with them in a way, right? They have to have that kind of relationship with them, but in a way that kind of makes them collaborators, right? You know, and that's kind of what happens here. And there's also Alec Guinness's character in The Bridge Over the River Kwai. It's a very, very similar sort of situation. And that's kind of the situation that Diriel finds herself in here.
Yeah. By the way, one, I had a, and I there's probably not going to be an awesome time to bring it up. So I'll just bring it up now. Morgoth wearing the Silmarils and the impact of the Silmarils. Rhiannon, I loved the description of Morgoth's return, right? How the first thing you see, like the way that we know that Morgoth is back, is the light of the Silmarils entering the room, right, and shining on like everybody's faces, and then you know, then you see Morgoth coming in. One of the things that made me think, and I don't know if there's a way that we can integrate this exactly or anything, but it made me really think back to all the discussions we had back in season 1 about Melkor and his motivations and why he was doing what he was doing, and the choices that we made back in season 1, which were in particular, like, we did not want him just to be, you know, a completely terrorizing bad guy from the moment he comes. We wanted to dramatize his fall because according to Tolkien, Melkor does have a fall. It just mostly happens off screen, he's kind of already fallen by the time we meet him. And certainly he's already fallen by the time and is like known to be fallen by the time he gets to Middle-earth. So, we changed the dynamics of that so as to emphasize his fall. And I was remembering, of course, in those discussions that we had, and it was one of my favorite elements of our discussions back in season 1, when we were thinking about the reasons for his fall. Like, why does he do what he does? What are some of the things that characterize that? And one of the things that we were talking about was his desire for light and his feeling, his relationship with light. And how he sort of felt like light in general, right, belonged to him, was his domain, which is one of the reasons why he wanted to kind of acquire Varda as well, right? And she turns him down. Anyway, so I was thinking about all that, and of course by this point, right, we've already talked about, Morgoth has passed his point of no return, right? And we discussed that, way back in season 2, right, with the Darkening of Valinor. But we've had few opportunities in the last 2 seasons, in seasons 3 and 4, to kind of show any remnant of his old viewpoint, right? There's an extent to which we've been willing to have Morgoth like, now he's just like, all right, I'm just mad and I'm going to smash everything as much as I can because like I'm going to rule everything, and that which I can't rule I will destroy. Which, okay, like, we can kind of see how he gets there, but we've almost, like, from a moral standpoint, right, or like even from like a self-image standpoint, we've almost had him like flatten out. You know what I mean? Partly that's because he's not been our protagonist. Morgoth has had very little screen time over the last couple seasons, which is what has happened, right? That's natural, because the attention has been shifting away from him, and he is now merely the antagonist most of the time. Anyway, all of this is just to set up the fact that, Rhiannon, your description of the light of the Silmarils was really kind of reminding me, here one of the things that I'd been kind of thinking in the back of my mind is like, man, we've sort of made Morgoth just sort of content to be the Lord of Darkness, Mr. like all light belongs to me. And now he's like Mr. Lord of Darkness. Like we didn't really show how he got there, but reading your description of his entry, or his re-entry rather, into Angband upon his return, it sort of struck me. It's not going to look like that to him. Right? One of the consequences of going around with the Silmarils on your forehead, right, is that you're never going to be in darkness. He probably doesn't think of himself as the Lord of Darkness at all, right? He probably is still convinced that he is continuous, like that he is the Lord of Light. Yes. Constantly surrounded by his radiant glory all the time. And doesn't even like, and because the Silmarils are always shining out from his brow, he doesn't see he never sees the shadow behind him, right? He never sees the whole of Angband is probably very dark, right? Because like, why, when you're walking around with the Silmarils on your head, you're not going to like flick on a lot of other lights when you're walking down the hall, right? You don't need it, right? So, just the idea that, the kind of both the idea, sort of the concept of the fact that he is almost completely surrounded by darkness it can be like a direct consequence of the fact that he sees himself, like all he sees is light, and still probably believes that.
Yeah.
As I say, I don't know. So my observation here isn't necessarily practical. I don't know, that we make this come up exactly, but, I wonder if there's some allusion that something that he could say at some point, which would kind of betray the fact that he doesn't see himself as dwelling in darkness, because he doesn't dwell in darkness, ever. What
if when the men come, they talk about their fear of the Lord of Light.
Right.
Because remember that, like, one of the ways that he convinced them to worship him was by turning off the sun and turning it back on again, right?
And not only that, but he was the only radiant thing in the darkness.
Right.
Right. Yeah.
So
exactly.
if the men think of Morgoth as the self-styled Lord of Light,
yes,
they might recognize that he's not actually the Lord of Light, but they know that he calls himself that.
Yeah. That
that's how
would
they
be a good
describe him.
opportunity. Yeah.
Yeah. So we got to keep that in mind for season 5.
So this will actually have to happen pretty early in the meeting with Min, because we do have Andreth calling him the Shadow and referring to him as like darkness and nameless.
Yes. But see,
so,
she has gained wisdom, right?
Right.
And
exactly.
so now, like,
you know, actually this tyrant up in Angband.
Exactly.
Right.
And think of him as the Lord of Light that the first men who arrive will remember him as.
She
Right.
sees through it, but it would be, but yes, exactly. The whole, no, exactly. It's a sign of her own wisdom and her own insight, and her own, I don't know what, education, essentially, that she sees through that. She acknowledges him as the Lord of Darkness. Even he doesn't get that fully.
And we can have this come out like very, very early, like
Absolutely.
when Finrod's like actually talking to the men for the first time.
And
so,
in the context of the first debates, with the, and like in the camp and the the mysterious dude who shows up and makes the argument. I mean, there's going to be lots of discussion there, in that context, and that would be the time to do it.
Now, speaking of light and darkness and debates, we debated for quite a long time on how to arrange this like attempted escape on the part of the slaves.
Yes.
It was very, very difficult because we had to find something that would be believable for them to start doing at this point that they couldn't have done before. And so we decided on styling the place where these people are kept as pits rather than cells. Because cells pose a whole host of problems. It's really hard to have like 8 to 12 foot tall people communicating or in the same shots as these people if they're in cells. Like the whole thing's a mess.
Yes. And there's something. Okay, so one of the challenges here is like, how do you, I mean, these are Noldor, right? These are like 3rd generation Noldor that we're talking about, and you don't want them like chipping away at their cell floors with a spoon, I mean, it's like, it can't look too Alcatraz, right?
Right. Yes.
But at the same time, you got to do something.
What are you going to do? Right.
Yeah.
We also, once we had the pits, we couldn't have Sauron or worse, Morgoth, like climbing up and down ladders into these pits, because that's not threatening, right?
Yeah.
Like that's not scary.
Yeah.
So like to have Sauron just kind of like drop down, like superhero landing into the middle of these pits.
Yeah, I was sort of imagining Sauron
up.
falling at like slower than gravitational rate.
Oh
like,
yeah, I'm sure.
like sort of swooping down. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. He does kind of like a Neo landing, right?
Yeah. Or even like a kind of like a Batman descent, I'm thinking, with like a cape kind of thing. Yeah.
Yes. Probably not quite so explicit, but yes, I
exactly. Not quite so explicit. I'm just saying the genre of descent, I was thinking.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And having him like physically grab and toss Edelus out of the pit onto the floor, and we had like discussion, like, is he strong enough to just do that? Well, yeah, sure, why not? That's fine. It's only 110 pounds, whatever, 20 feet in the air, no big deal.
Yeah, and he doesn't actually toss Edelus. She stays down in the pit because she has to like take the tool that they're using to escape off of Zuriel and reveal the whole escape plan that the Noldor were working on.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, I don't have a problem with her climbing down the ladder, but I mean, that's fine. Anyway, but you see why there are so many like really fiddly things that need to be worked out in these circumstances to make it work.
One of the things that I found myself wondering when I was reading this episode was, is there a way by which we could... It seemed like the best possible option when it came to the escape plan of the Noldor would be just to like do and say as little as possible about it, right? Like if it could be suggested and not shown, that would be I'm not saying I know how to do that, because I don't. But I did find anytime that we were like describing the details, like the chipping out of handholds and the covering up of handholds in order to conceal them and things like that, that felt a little bit labored. But again, it's, as you say, it's really challenging to think of circumstances in which this would all work. And we don't want them, if they're in cells, it's different and more complicated. And we don't want them drawing up complicated plans on a chalkboard.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, the vague impression I always got, because of course the text gives very little in the way of detail about this kind of thing. And we do know that some Noldor escaped, in fact.
Yeah.
That did happen. And
we are going to show successful escapes soon.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Not necessarily from these pits. They might be escaping from their forges where they're working or other places in England.
Right, which is the impression I always got, and especially from mines, right? Since they are in fact tunneling and opening up tunnels, like they're supposed to be doing that, they are able to use that to their advantage and actually use the tunnels to escape.
Right.
But that seems very difficult to try to describe that. And anyway,
and have the reveal be done very quickly in that setting. So what I would say is that when you're showing it on screen, it won't seem as fiddly. I think when you're writing it out, it seems fiddly because you have to describe in detail exactly what's happening so that whoever's making the set design and the person who's shooting it, like they know what to do.
Yeah.
Whereas when you see it on screen, you're going to see like people like quickly just throwing dirt on the wall, or just quickly, you're going to see shots of, and then you're going to see shots from behind. Right.
Yeah.
So you're not going to be watching like for 5 minutes while somebody chips away at a step.
No, of course. Yeah.
This is one of those things where, like, I think, and we've talked about stuff like this before, where something, when you have to write it out, it looks really fiddly. But I think that once it's actually happening on the screen, it's gonna, like, basically we just have to give the audience enough information so that it's a believable scenario. Right. We don't need to go into excruciating detail about how it's happening. We just have to have buy-in so that we don't have people going, "Oh, that's ridiculous. How could they possibly do that? Where'd they get the tools? How'd they make that thing?"
Right.
One thing to kind of get off of that for just a second that I really liked was the switch where Edelas is telling Diriel anybody could be a spy.
Yes.
Like anybody. It could be anybody. You don't know what it's like in here, man.
Right.
And then it turns out that it's Edelas herself, who winds up being the tool of the enemy. And she told her. She warned her the whole time. She told her.
Right. Yeah. No, that was cool. I did really like that as well. Yeah, that was cool. Diriel's whole position in this thing, again, the way that she's mostly... I'm not saying this to diminish her role, but she's essentially like Edelas's foil throughout this episode, right? She's like the, sort of like the normative comparison for Edelas, and like also Edelas is sort of the warning for her of what could happen to her, and she's, because Edelas has been here longer.
And the audience knows Edelas.
Yes.
The audience barely knows Diriel at this point.
Yes.
I mean, she's been on screen before, but essentially this episode is the introduction for Diriel.
Yes.
And it's the worst thing that ever happened to Edelas. So, to this point. So it's important to see it as an Athelos point of view story.
Yep.
While introducing Diriel and letting the audience recognize where Athelos is based on
Exactly.
Diriel.
The contrast with Diriel. Yeah.
Yeah, that she's new and she's hopeful and she like makes plans and she believes her eyes and
right.
speaks of her child.
Right.
And they're also House of Finarfin versus married to one of the sons of Feanor.
Yes.
So they're getting along with this to work together at the escape plan. In the end, it goes with the whole season-long theme of the reconciliation of the different houses of the Noldor.
Right.
Meanwhile, their sons are on the outside trying
Doing
to
the
find
same
them.
thing.
Yeah, okay. So I kind of loved the Orodreth Celebrimbor buddy cop thing. That was really fun. Like
We were hoping you might like that.
I really did like that. I mean, first of all, again, I'm a big fan of any time we're playing the long game, you know? I'm an especially big fan of the really long game of setting up scenes from the Lord of the Rings, but of course it's clear what is being set up here, right? As of course it's going to be Celebrimbor is going to be sticking with Orodreth when he separates from his father, right? You know, the whole Orodreth Celebrimbor thing is going to pay off huge when it's time to have I'm losing my words. That word,
Celebrimbor will have to make a choice in Nargothrond, and
the word when you unjustly seize the crown from somebody else.
Usurp.
Thank you, usurp. Oh man, like I hate it when a word abandons me. Yes, when we get the usurpation and everything, we're gonna. Yeah, that is a huge
I'm
payoff.
writing this day down right now.
Huge Orodreth for a huge payoff for Orodreth and Celebrimbor. Absolutely.
And we'll also have Celebrimbor there when Turin comes in and like sort of kind of takes over.
Yes.
And Celebrimbor can be like, Orodreth, you shouldn't listen to these awesome people who come to your kingdom and say they can help you. Don't trust this guy.
Dude, yeah, exactly. Yeah. No, and the way in which, I mean, Celebrimbor, I was going to say that Celebrimbor's presence in Nargothrond is an afterthought in the Silmarillion. That's not even true. It's a posthumous afterthought. I mean, that one sentence in which Celebrimbor is mentioned in the text of the Silmarillion wasn't even written by Tolkien. It was written by Christopher. Like, he mentions that as one of the sentences that he included.
Right.
Because that was one of the concepts, like the character of the existence of Celebrimbor was a later idea, of course. It was a Lord of the Rings idea. And it needs to get mapped back into the Silmarillion, but Tolkien never got around to mapping it back into the Silmarillion. So Christopher, doing what he so often does in his editing of the Silmarillion, like tries to minimize the amount of text he has to add, but he feels like I can't have there be zero references to Celebrimbor in the entire Silmarillion, right? So you know, he puts that one sentence like, at this time Celebrimbor, you know, left his father and remained in Nargothrond. That's it. So again, it's he's even far less than an afterthought there. So being able to tell Celebrimbor's story and get ourselves, you know, more familiar. It's just the way in which this set up, not just that story, which is great, but the character of Celebrimbor, right? Beginning with the, you know, giving us this initial foundation of like, you know, life in the character of Celebrimbor, and thinking about how long we're going to be able to ride that train, right? All the way to the forging of the Rings of Power. So cool. And thinking about the beef between Celebrimbor and Sauron, right? When like when Celebrimbor discovers that he's been done in at the end by Sauron, remembering all the way back to, I mean, just I feel like the Celebrimbor stuff. I'm like, boy, this is like payoff after payoff after payoff down the road. Yeah.
And also we get to use Celebrimbor to kind of rehumanize Feanor in a way. Yeah,
that was good.
Because now we used Celebrimbor the exact same way back in season 2, episode 11, where we see Feanor working with his grandson. Yes. And you get this really tender, beautiful moment between the two of them, and you get to see exactly all the amazing stuff that Feanor could have done if he wasn't such a jerk. Right? And Celebrimbor reminds us of that.
Yeah.
because to him, barring one particular exceptional event, he was just grandpa.
Exactly.
And
the greatest craftsman of all time, right? Yeah, absolutely. Right. Yeah, and of course he's such a wonderful. Celebrimbor is just the perfect character in whom to sort of locate the rehabilitation or partial rehabilitation, not only of the Feanorians but of Feanor, right? Because like the sons are too close. They've sworn the oath, right? They have their own issues. Maedhros, of course, is awesome and is going to be in large part, though not 100%, rehabilitated himself and already is. But rehabilitation in Maedhros is kind of a thing, right? But anyway, Celebrimbor is the perfect voice to say that, because if somebody like, forget Curufin, if somebody, like, well, any of the Sons of Feanor were speaking up in defense of Feanor, with one of the House of Finarfin, no, you wouldn't buy it at all. It just sounds like, contentiousness, right?
Right. Or defensiveness, exactly.
Yeah.
But with Celebrimbor, but again, he is the perfect one to help the audience not just simply demonize Feanor, or at least to remember the good side too. So yeah, no, that was definitely another thing that I liked about.
Or to use him as a particular plaything for a child's birthday party, for example,
right.
As some maybe want to do.
Exactly. Yes, those who are interested in continually beating Feanor with a stick. Yes, exactly. Not to name any names.
I'm on board. I'm just saying.
Yeah, I hear you.
There are also redeeming qualities as well.
There are all kinds of justifications for it, no question. But I agree. I think that this is a really good thing. The one, and this was hard. The one thing that I simultaneously liked or like really enjoyed, but was uncertain about. Orodreth and Celebrimbor joke a lot. And I was like, there were moments when I was really enjoying their conversation and their kind of banter, but I was like, I'm not sure if it totally fit. Like, both of them are like going to rescue their moms, probably being tortured in Angband right now. It's a little grim, the occasion. I'm not saying that. And, like we were saying with Maedhros before, it's not like they have to be totally serious all the time, but there were moments when it felt a little over lighthearted.
Yeah, okay, so just really quick, because I'm sure Rhiannon wants to speak to that as well, but in a quick read of that script that I was able to give it, there were definitely things that I was looking at. I was like, okay, I'm gonna have to come back over this when I have a little bit more time to kind of see what I can mention to her about specific things. And I think I saw what you were seeing as well.
It's hard, like I said. You don't want to just go all the way, especially since, for crying out loud, the Orodreth and Celebrimbor subplot of this episode is the primary contrast, is the primary alternative to the Prisoners of Angband.
Right. Plot. It's the only opportunity for light.
For anything light. Yeah, exactly. So it's going to be a wholly grim episode if we just have the grim and suffering prisoners, and then we shift to the, grim and suffering rescuers, and then we go back to, so I do totally get that as well. But yeah, again, there were just, I agree with you, Nick. I think it's probably just maybe a light revision thing rather than a major change.
The scenes where Celebrimbor and Orodreth were joking, the point of that was to show them putting on a little bit of bravado, because they are afraid of going to Angband, but they aren't really trying to let the others see that they're afraid. So we debated for a while what they could be joking about. We didn't really settle on anything, I don't think.
Right.
It's them joking in the scene I think you're talking about, where they're doing funny voices and they're making fun of Morgoth.
Yeah.
Like, I like parts of that. Like, I like when they out there and they say, when we go up to his gate, he'll just tell us to get thee gone from my gate.
Yeah, that was, like the Feanor reference was brilliant. I loved that. Yeah. I loved that.
And I think that maybe like, I think we could like workshop a couple of those scenes, and with very, very minor changes. I think it'll, because I think the tone, that you're getting there is good. I just think that the tone of the jokes might be, we can shift that a little bit, and I think it'll be spot on.
Or even just like a sharper transition back to like the recollection of like the grimness of their mission, you know, or so, you know, just something to sort of show that although they are being, you know, sort of laughing together, there's some, it's a little bit forced, right? You know,
well, and which again is acting too,
right?
Like there's that
absolutely. Also. Yeah, there's also the actors being able to pull it off. You're right. Okay, so let's talk about the application of the spell of bottomless dread on Etherlos. And the depiction of that. That's super hard. First question. First thing I want to clarify. What are we... So not thinking about like this necessarily from her point of view, just like describing it objectively. What are we wanting to establish as Etherlos's state after the spell of bottomless dread? What exactly is the effect of the spell of bottomless dread on Etherlos?
So this was difficult because sort of in between writing this episode and the discussion on this podcast, as treachery and stuff happens, you sort of like changed, or I perceive there's some kind of change in what you're expecting Etherlos to be. We thought, and I thought when I was writing this episode, that after she has a spell of bottomless dread placed on her, she's like catatonic until she has to become Morgoth's mind-controlled slave. But then at the beginning of episode 9, you guys were like, no, we want her to be like healed and capable of interacting with people again. Like there was this big switch there. So in episode 8, what I was trying to do was show like her mind being taken over by Morgoth. So she has that scene in the darkness where like his eyes are the dominant thing, and she gets these like little glimpses of the future. So she sees like a little bit of fire and some scary things in there, and then that's something that I'll bring up. I think it's episode 10 or episode 11, but like that comes into play later in the season. But then like she needs to be so completely bowed to his will that she'll just do anything like a puppet when he's commanding her.
Yeah.
Without any clue to the people around her that that's what's happening.
Because see, so the problem there, and the reason for the at least perceived, nothing could be likelier than me actually changing my mind between one episode and the next. But even if I didn't, and it was just a perceived change, I honestly don't even remember. But I suspect that the problem that's leading me into those issues is simply, if we want, which I thought that we did, and I think we do, if we want Etherlos's actions to be a betrayal or like a betrayal, right? Then it can't be the catatonic version. Or, I mean, there could be some circumstances in which it could, but they would be much more difficult. They would be much more, our options would be much more constrained about what to do with her, to have her betray the rest of them.
Yeah. What she winds up doing in our version of episode 9 would certainly be nigh impossible.
Yeah. I mean, she'd have to like hop up out of bed and then ambush the messenger, unbeknownst to anybody, right? And that's
right. And he's not going to immediately notice something's up when he sees her, when, as far as he knows, she's comatose in bed.
Right. Besides which, but there are two things here, right? There are two things which are potentially in conflict, which I think, again, some of the awkwardness here is us trying to reconcile these two things. One thing that I'm referring to is the idea that the spell of bottomless dread, right, is really like a breaking of their minds, right? This is Morgoth just pancaking their will, right? I mean, he is absolutely destroying them. He is making them into his tool. Their wills are being just overridden. So this is not a question. This is not a temptation, right? This is not a corruption.
This is more of a sock puppet.
Exactly. This is a hostile takeover of the mind of a victim, is what this is, right? So there's that on the one hand. On the other hand, there's the description, very brief though it is, right, of the much more nuanced reaction. So remember when the whole, elf capture program is to like those very few sentences in the Silmarillion, right? When the elf capture program is described, we are given the impression that sometimes some of those who escape from Angband do in fact betray those who take them back in again. That's a thing that does in fact occur, and that couldn't happen if it, I mean, like there needs to be, and again, the sense that I get from those sentences is that they look like they're okay. They look like they have escaped and that they are themselves, but they're not completely driving the bus. So we have to have both, right? There has to be enough of an appearance of normality for them to be taken in by their loved ones in order to be betrayed. But there has to be that kind of genuine overriding. I don't think that even Tolkien was suggesting there that any of them have become like have been converted to Morgoth's side. That's why Maegwyn's betrayal is such a big deal, right? I mean, Maegwyn's, because he is overwhelmed too. I mean, he comes before the presence of Morgoth and he is he is not weak, just weak-willed, but he does betray them. He makes a choice. Maegwyn makes a choice. He does become a collaborator and conspirator with Morgoth.
Morgoth doesn't just pull the information out of his brain.
No, and he doesn't just use him as a sock puppet either, right? So I want to retain that as a contrast. I mean, I think it's important for us to have, to a lesser extent, Gorlim, and to a greater extent, Maegwyn, right, be clear exceptions to this. Like what happens to Ethelos is not like that. She doesn't do that. She doesn't choose. She does not betray her family and the rest of them. I mean, she does, but she doesn't choose to do it, right? She has been overridden. She has been forced. She's compelled. But again, the two things are really hard to reconcile.
Is the concern?
Sorry.
I'm just trying to get my hands on what the concern is about the depiction. Is the concern like the way that she's acting post Spell of Bottomless Dread, like she doesn't speak at all? Is that part of the issue?
No. Okay. So I think part of my not concerns, confusions, uncertainties would probably be the way that I would describe it about the depiction of Ethelos post Spell of Bottomless Dread are more about her actions in episode 9 than about her actions in episode 8. And I have a suggestion. It's a fairly significant suggestion, but I don't think it need do much violence to the story as it's being composed, but I don't know what you'll think of it. My suggestion is not to depict things from her point of view. We're doing a lot of point of view camera work in these both of these two episodes, 8 and 9, especially with Ethelos. And that on the one hand is potentially really cool, but it's also kind of risky. And in particular, I think it's challenging with Ethelos, especially up in episode 9, because, well, one of the things that it, at least potentially, confused for me was the extent to which her will is still operative. Point of view almost implies will, freedom of will, right? Not quite, but almost does, right? So, there were moments when I was, reading the descriptions and trying to picture in my head what it would look like on screen. And when I was picturing it, I sort of felt like it seems like Ethelwalst is choosing this. That she in like the murder of the messenger. The description of the murder of the messenger made me feel that way.
So you want it to be more clear that she's possessed.
I think that if we stay outside her head, like all we have to do is show her from the outside, right? Show her actions from the outside. And I think that will help to show. Maybe. I don't know.
Real quick. Is that scene shot from her point of view or the messenger's point of view? Because I thought
it's
the messenger.
It switches.
Yeah. When the messenger dies, you see the messenger die from the messenger's point of view, but you do see her looking out and seeing Morgoth's eyes before that happens.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because she's all right. So the idea of the camera. So what you're saying is if that was just shot in like a standard, in a more conventional way, that issue kind of goes away.
Or to me, it diminishes because here's the larger issue. And again, Rhiannon, I could tell. It was one of those things, as often happens, at like particularly fun moments of the Peter Jackson films, when like something's happening on screen and I can hear in my head the line of text that they're thinking of in that scene, right? And that was happening to me. Like I was remembering that line about Morgoth's eyes, right? When you were doing the Morgoth's eyes stuff for Ethelwalst. And I do think that that's really important and a really significant way for us to make sure that, again, that people understand the total domination of her will by his. But specifically having her see Morgoth's eyes in others. So there were, I felt that it opened up it created the possibility that the viewer is going to think her not like possessed, but rather merely confused or deceived. The impression that I kept getting was, especially with the messenger, she sees Morgoth's eyes in his face and then she attacks him, right? And so I was like, does she think she's rebelling against Morgoth? Was a question I found myself asking. Do you see what I mean? Like, so is this her own will striking out against, but like the problem, like the effect that Morgoth has created is, and of course the problem is that also fits with what happened with Angrod, of course, with what Sauron did to her as well, where she's striking, she's striking the messenger because she thinks that he's actually Morgoth. It is what you're concerned that it's saying. That seemed to me a very plausible reaction to the way, again, to that particular site. But whereas instead, what is happening, like when she is attacking the messenger, is when she is acting most not under her own will. It's not just that she's being deceived. Right. It's not only that it's not that she is being misled, such that she might have at that moment a moment of realization where she's like, oh, shoot, that wasn't Morgoth after all. That was like, one of my people. No, like this is not like a mistake on her part of a case of mistaken identity. This is like she's not driving the bus. One way of saying this, if anything, maybe what we should be seeing on screen is not her seeing Morgoth's eyes in everybody else. Maybe we, the viewers, should be seeing Morgoth's eyes in her face.
I can think of a couple of horror shows that use the idea of seeing others in distorted forms to show that you are yourself possessed. One example is The Exorcism of Emily Rose does that with Emily Rose.
Yes.
And Supernatural does that with Hellhounds.
But it also, like Professor Olsen was saying, it implies deception.
Confusion. Yeah.
Yes. And confusion.
If this were animated, it would be really easy because then we could just kind of like put a slightly less than opaque set of Morgoth's eyes like in the background as we're looking up at Ethelwalst, who just killed this guy. Like, that would be really easy. It's less easy to do that in live action.
Yes.
So if I may, what I'm trying to convey with the spell bottomless thread that's placed on Ethelwalst and what I understood with this version of the spell's bottomless dread is that it is Morgoth's first attempt at it.
Yes.
So he does go way too hard on Ethlos and like fully dominates her mind, unlike what he's going to do later with Mygelin. Mygelin is much more in control when he has a spell of bottomless dread placed on him than Ethlos is. And so what I had happen with Ethlos, and I probably don't convey this perfectly, but my goal is to show that she can sort of be used as a puppet by them whenever they want to. So they can turn that off and on.
Yeah.
So and it's like partially
so they
done.
don't have to force her to act convincingly as herself, I guess.
Right.
Well, they aren't. What happens is she's like, she can go into being controlled by Morgoth mode, or she can be in normal Ethlos mode. And normal Ethlos mode is traumatized, just got rescued from
Traumatized, broken.
England,
Yes, exactly. I was just going to say that. Yeah.
Ever again.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
She doesn't, but she doesn't remember that Morgoth is driving the bus, as has been brought up before.
Yeah.
Yeah, she doesn't remember those times when she like is seeing people with Morgoth's eyes or seeing the sun as it was when it was eclipsed. Like those things I think are really, really powerful, and I kind of still want to show them from Ethelos's point of view.
You know, there are a couple, I think I can definitely see a couple moments in which showing things from, I totally agree about the eclipse, by the way. I thought that was really, really cool. So I definitely wouldn't I wouldn't want to lose all of the moments in which we're seeing things from Ethelos's point of view. But if we are imagining that those moments of overriding, right, are like a complete blank to her. So that if we're saying Ethelos's experience is kind of like, well, it's like Ginny Weasley in the Chamber of Secrets more extremely, right? Essentially.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. In that case, I think we definitely should never see things from her point of view while it's happening, because that implies that she's seeing it, right? Whereas if she doesn't even remember killing the messenger, right?
Messenger is she doesn't like see the messenger with Morgoth's eyes. The way I'm pretty sure I have that written is she kills the messenger sees her like about to stab him or whatever, and then everything goes completely dark, like she can't see anything except Morgoth's eyes are like shining above her, and she's dragging the body of the messenger away.
Yeah, I mean, I think if we can, yeah.
Also, she has to, on some level, remember, because she's got to confess to it too.
Yeah, and so what I have happening at the end of her confession to Angrod is she is fighting against Morgoth's will, and so like little bits of real Ethelos are getting through even when he's trying to control her.
Yes, and her confession at the end should be a triumph for her. Like she has successfully, even if only briefly, overthrown the control of the will of Morgoth long enough for her to remember even dimly the things that she has been made to do, and B, like confess the fact that she's been made to do them. That can be, and I think should be, seen as a victory on her part. So we don't have to have her aware of it at the time in order for her to be able to. I think we can show. I don't think we've got to black out the screen or anything like that.
Right.
Again,
right.
That's part of why my argument is to move away from her point of view in those moments. I'd rather not be anywhere near her point of view when she's in the grip, right? Because also, I think it might do more to do less there, right? If we just see it happening and the audience is not even 100% sure. I mean, if they're asking themselves, hang on, wait, is Ethelos driving the bus here or not? That seems to me good. That seems to me okay for them to be wondering exactly what's happening and why she's doing this. Is she a collaborator or is she being forced? Whereas again, to me, doing those moments, going into her point of view in those moments feels to me like it kind of confuses the issue a little bit.
So
I mean, I think we can
for-
definitely take a second look at that and see what we
Yeah,
can.
it's hard. Like I said, all this stuff is really hard. This is really tricky stuff to try to depict.
There are
Agreed.
some moments that I really like her seeing other people with Morgoth's eyes, like specific scenes where I would like to keep that. I think it doesn't need to happen as frequently as I have it written, but there are definitely places where I would really like to keep that element of it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Are any of those moments times when she is acting completely out of Morgoth's will?
Well, one that I really like, this isn't my favorite one, but one that I really like is when it's in episode 9. So, like, I don't know if
Yeah, I know we're kind of sliding into episode 9 in this theme anyway, but that's okay.
Okay, well, it's in episode 9. It's the one where Angrod and Agnor meet up with Fingolfin and Fingin, and they're having this little war council, and they're talking about they sent the messengers at the Feanorians, but as soon as they start talking about the messenger and the Feanorian, it switches to Ethelos's point of view, and everyone around her has Morgoth's eyes, so she's like freaking out, not paying attention, not hearing what they're talking about the messenger. So like that's sort of hidden from her. She doesn't realize that because she's focused on the fact that people have Morgoth's eyes.
I actually liked the scenes where multiple people had Morgoth's eyes better. Like that, because that to me more clearly conveyed the sense of like she is haunted everywhere by it. It was, that scene seemed to me, but especially since we do, if she is going to, through her own will, achieve that victory that we described. I mean, if she's going to succeed in throwing off the spell, even briefly, we want to set that up. We want to show struggle, right? We want to show her suffering from this and even struggling against
potentially something she could do if she was for a second allowed to do it.
Yeah.
Like there's a reason why Morgoth's not letting her hear this.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. So I mean, I think that scene seemed good. That seemed to me effective. Yeah.
Okay. Is there anything else in episode 8 that we want to talk about before we move into a more full discussion of episode 9?
The one last thing. Sauron's reaction to Morgoth's spell. The parallel that we have set up, right? This whole situation looks very much like the situation was. This is like the orcs all over again, right? We had Sauron with his super secret orc necromantic orc project, right? This like all of this elaborate, complicated spiritual / psychological stuff that he was doing with the elves, and then Morgoth comes over at the end of season 2 and is just like monsters, right? And basically like takes a spiritual sledgehammer and does this from compared to what Sauron was trying to do, more effective in a sense, but compared to what Sauron was doing, much cruder thing, right? And the sense that I got there of one of the things is that we had a little, like we were opening a little bit of a rift between Sauron and Morgoth there, right? Like, yes, Morgoth is stronger than Sauron. Morgoth, like, effected in one swoop what Sauron had not yet succeeded in doing. But what Morgoth did was not what Sauron was trying to do. In a sense, it was almost like what he was trying to avoid doing, right? And we have seen Sauron's scorn for the orcs ever since that, right? This situation is parallel to that. Here he's doing this elaborate thing and Gothmog doesn't get it, but Gothmog's an idiot, right? So Sauron has been doing this really ornate thing and got the Angrod thing, which was so awesome in episode 6, right? So he's been playing these really effective mind games, which have borne some fruit, some excellent fruit, but have not yet fully, his strategies are not yet fully developed. And then what does Morgoth do? He comes home and 5 minutes later he's like, whammy, right? And I do you guys see Sauron having an impulse to kind of be like, oh Yeah. There goes the boss with his sensitive touch again, right?
Right.
I mean, do you guys see that, or do you not see that there?
So
I do see the parallel, and I agree that what Sauron admires about Morgoth is his strength more than his approach.
Yes. Yeah.
But in this case, what Sauron is seeing here is domination of wills,
right.
which is what Sauron wants. So
Right.
this is a case where he doesn't just look at it and be like, he ruined my project. He's like, I want to do that.
Right.
What he just did, I want that.
Right. It speaks directly to Sauron's end game, but Sauron's end game is that on a global scale.
Right.
Like, he wants to have exactly that on every living person all the time.
Or is he quite there yet, Sauron?
He's not there.
Maybe he's not
okay.
quite there yet.
But
Maybe
he's definitely admiring and recognizing what Morgoth just did in a way that he did not to the Orc project.
Yes.
And it's such a
kind of
surgical
asked
tool.
his earlier conversation with Morgoth.
Right. Yeah.
When he talks about how he and Thuringwethil disguised themselves as elves, and they went among the elves and they deceived the elves into thinking that they were just normal elves like them. He is, in describing that to Morgoth, he's also sort of asking Morgoth, when he talks about the difficulties he's been having with the prisoners, he's saying, is there a way that we could just make these prisoners do what Thuringwethil and I did, where they look like elves, but they really serve us? So they're not ugly and messed up and monsters like the orcs. They're beautiful elves, but they're on our side, and we can make them do whatever we want them to do.
Right. This is a surgical tool. They're able to get these people completely dominated and then use them for very, very specific missions that can affect the war with the elves, as opposed to just a hammer that's going to obliterate a bunch of people.
Right. Yeah.
So yes, it's not surgical on the individual
Right.
whom it's practiced,
Right.
obviously,
Right.
but the grander scheme of things, it absolutely is surgical.
In the bigger scheme, sure. Yeah, I'm just so.
And it's what he was after with like the fallen elves, when he like did the fallen elf thing that we decided he was doing in season 2.
Yeah.
It does that exact thing, but faster.
Right. Yeah, I guess the two things that I'm just wanting to think about, and we can, it's not a huge deal here, and obviously if anything of what I'm talking about now were to get integrated into this, it would be like 2 seconds of screen time, right, in his facial expression or something. So that's fine. But the two things that I'm thinking about here are where Sauron is in his trajectory, and we've talked about this. We don't want Sauron to go too fast, right? We still want to make sure that we understand where on his downward descent Sauron is, right? And that I think it's important to remind people he's less far down on the descent than Morgoth is. And I think it would be fun for us to find ways to show that. That there is still, Sauron is still, to some extent, believing that he is doing like the right things by efficient methods, superior methods to the methods of the namby-pamby good guys, but that he still believes himself to be doing a good thing, to be achieving a good end, right? Not just smashing things, not just destroying only, but building, creating, crafting, forming, that his end game should be, in his own mind, an end game of beauty and, creation, right? At least that's what he still is convinced that he's doing. Because again, we've got a very long game to play with Sauron, and we don't want him to go too far down that path too quickly. But the second thing is the relationship between him and Morgoth. And it's connected. As I said, we want to show them at different places on that road. And I think moments where Sauron is not uncomfortable in the sense of like, Sauron, you are Morgoth, you are violating my personal ethical standards. I have to become a conscientious objector to this super evil thing that Morgoth. I'm not that evil yet. I mean, obviously it's not like that, but that there should be some kind of divide there, potential rivalry even between Sauron and Morgoth.
I think
we tried to convey in the scene right after he sees Ethos have the spell of bottomless thread put on her is he needs to have a look where he's like happy with it, and then he's like, wait a minute, did Morgoth do that to me?
Yeah.
I think
the way I have it written is Morgoth says the wills of lesser creatures are easy to control.
Right.
Maren smiles first, then looks a little concerned. Did Morgoth do it again?
That makes me uncomfortable. Yeah.
Right. I think it would be.
Wait a minute, am I one of those lesser creatures that you're controlling?
Yeah.
Well, he is actually, but
exactly.
I think it would be entirely appropriate for Sauron to look at least marginally uncomfortable for some period of time with the situation. It gets at what he wants done, right? And it does it in a way that is surgical and can be used subtly. But it also indicates some things that he's not entirely comfortable with, and kind of suggests that he might not be in as much control of the situation as he thinks he is.
Yes.
Because it's possible that he may think that Morgoth might go too far. It has to have occurred to Sauron that Morgoth might go too far at some point.
Yeah.
Past his, rigorous moral standards, obviously.
Right.
I'm not sure this would be the case, though, because this is what Sauron asked Morgoth to do.
Right.
Like,
I'm not saying that. Yeah.
Like that where thinks Morgoth goes too far, maybe with captains later on. But I think right here with Ethelos, this is exactly what Sauron wants.
I agree. I agree with that. But what I'm saying is that there might be some level in which Sauron thinks that he can handle Morgoth if Morgoth starts to go too far, that he can sway him in some way.
Right.
But I think that this should show him no. This guy is way beyond you.
Yeah.
And that if he did somehow exceed your standards of capacity for evil, that you're not going to be able to do anything about it.
Right. Yeah. I guess the way I'm thinking about it is, remember we talked again back in season 1 when we were talking about the initial conversion of Myron. We were talking about the vision, right? He believed in Morgoth's vision. And what I'm thinking is there's gonna come a point, and I think we're getting close to it, when Sauron is going to start feeling that Morgoth has lost the vision, or at least he's at risk of losing the vision, Right. And that there's, and then the point will come where Sauron feels like, I am the holder of the vision. Morgoth has lost it. I am the holder of the vision.
Yes.
And
I am the true Dark Lord.
Yes. And because I'm like the one who's really doing the right, he's lost his way. And my immediate theory is maybe that's where Sauron goes. Maybe that's why Sauron leaves the picture after Beren and Luthien. Maybe that's why he's no longer Mr. Right-Hand Henchman all the time after Beren and Luthien, because...
Or after the Fallen Goblin, so we can pay off the Gothmog Sauron compliment, just saying.
Right. Well, I'm not wanting to, goodness knows, I'm not wanting to ship Sauron on. We've talked about this, right? We don't want to ship Sauron off and have him be off screen for 5 seasons, right? Yeah. Until we get to, after the war. But anyway, yeah. So we'll worry about that later on.
Yes.
And we're getting late, and we might not have time. Well, I know we won't have time for all the details of episode 9, but let's do what we can. Let's do what we can and talk about some of the bigger issues.
So real quick before we get into this, I feel like there's a need to address some things. That being that while there may be the appearance of some sort of adversarial relationship between us and the host,
there are occasionally differences of opinion.
Right, there certainly are. And we're about to run into a nest of them.
Yes.
But the most important thing here is that like this is all in fun. Like, this is a fun project that we're all working on together, and sometimes the things that one or another of us might really, really want doesn't happen,
Yeah.
and that's okay.
And that's okay.
That's okay.
Yes.
It's,
and I would also add that some of us, and I would say in particular you and me, Nick, also have fun disagreeing with each other.
Right.
And and I think it is good to remind people that we even when you and I are arguing with each other, we're largely doing it because we enjoy doing that, actually.
We're two people who have, in general, made a living of talking to people, and generally in the most persuasive way we can think of.
Exactly.
So that's kind of going to happen a lot. But there's no revolt planned. There's no there's no competing projects in mind.
There's
like,
no oppression intended from it. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And when we talk about like going to the mat over things, like that's really just all in fun.
Yes.
And like nobody is actually mad, like, well, not for very long anyway, angry with each other.
Yes.
Some people might use a lot of caps under certain circumstances.
It happens. It happens. Yeah.
But it's all in fun, and I think that ultimately, because I think that the outline for this episode is, in some ways strengthened by the fact that there were constraints put on us that we weren't thrilled with and that we had to kind of work around. So I think that the end product works. That said, there are still disagreements that are kind of surrounding that, and we can get into all those, but I just wanted to kind of like throw that out there.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I would say, corresponding to that on the other side, just as you're saying that, part of the, sort of fun of the project is that there are constraints, right? You're being handed constraints, and you need to, and you're being asked to operate within those. And you're right. That's part of the challenge. It's part of the creative challenge. And I will also say from my perspective, it is part of the fun and delight is seeing where there are a bunch of things that you guys have done in these episodes that I never imagined and never envisioned. And there are so many, and seeing the directions that you guys have taken some of these things, even when they have either gone in directions that I never anticipated, or even gone in directions, that I was definitely not thinking of. It is delightful to see these things, and it's been one of the reasons why I have so much enjoyed the scripts this season, because it's even more satisfying. It's much more. It is just seeing the fuller flowering of the work that you guys are doing in the actual script planning stuff that you've been doing from the beginning. It just makes it the more compelling and the more interesting to see from my perspective. The experience of reading the scripts has been fascinating, because on the one hand, it's like, wow, like the story that we talked about and that I was imagining has come to life. And at the same time, I don't recognize it. It's like, it's not my story. I didn't write that, and it's cool. Like both sides of that are really cool and really fun. So I think that that's really great.
So this one was about the Dagor Aglareb.
The Dagor Aglareb.
Right. And so from the onset, the main thrust of the Dagor Aglareb was moved from Dorthonion over towards Minas Tirith. It was kind of restricted to a smaller scale event rather than being kind of like this continent-wide campaign that's described. So there were some issues that we had to kind of wrestle with, because like obviously Dorthonion is kind of more central to where most of the Noldor are. I mean, obviously Minas Tirith is a lot closer to Turgon, but we kind of eliminated him from the picture anyway, so that wouldn't have been a tremendous issue. Also trying to get, because we had to do a little math on this one to figure out where people would be and when.
Yes.
Sorry about that. And And also keep an eye on whose intelligence is telling them what and when they find out. So one of the things that we decided pretty early on was that the Feanorians have their own kind of forward outposts that are giving them like pretty much almost as real time as could possibly be under the circumstances. Information. So as Mythros is making his way towards the battlefield, he's getting updates as en route. Right.
Absolutely.
His guys are communicating with him to tell, so he knows that he's got to make the left turn at Albuquerque. He doesn't. He's not just blindly marching out onto Ardgallan.
Absolutely. And by the way, this Marie, thank you for this map. This is such a wonderful illustration of several of the things that were discussed in the script, right? In particular, the way that this emphasizes the relative distances, right, to the Feanorians and especially to Turgon out here, to sort of show it helps to really illustrate very clearly a lot of the dynamics there.
Yeah, we definitely used the map while we were planning it. But to give credit where it's due, Rhiannon's the one who actually put that image together.
Great.
Awesome. So as she was writing the script, she had something to refer to.
My map was much more crude and I think has been lost to the internet at some point. So, as is wont to happen, I threw something together for our discussion, but it wasn't, it wasn't ready for the masses, I would say. This is much, much better.
Yeah, I was working on a cosplay while we were doing this discussion. So what I did to make this map was I watched the discussion over again and drew the map, like sort of as Nick drew it in our discussion. So if you want to see this map drawn live, go watch the script discussion.
Yeah, cool.
I did a tutorial about how to make a shield out of poster board.
Right. Cool.
So go on.
Since we're not going to have enough time to go act by act through all of this now and talk about the bigger things. So I want to start with the bigger things.
Okay, good.
Because, a lot of, because I mean, the bigger things are what are going to determine a lot of the smaller decisions along the way. Right. Okay. So it seems to me that the most significant point of disagreement is it starts with the conception of the battle. Right? What is happening here? Exactly.
Right. So
what's Morgoth doing?
Right. So my understanding is that the way that it's written out is that Morgoth was making trial of the Noldor, which to me suggests an exploratory attack. So in Israel, I know this has happened where terrorists have made like kind of minor attacks in certain areas to gauge the response time of first responders, so that they can then do bigger attacks, wait until those first responders are going to be there, and hit them as well with a second wave. And this is kind of that in the way that it reads to me.
Yes, and now here's the challenge with that. The problem, which I can tell that you guys were perceiving, it was very plain that you were wanting to avoid this problem in the way that you were describing this. If we describe the battle exactly like that, there will be very little drama. There is almost no chance that the orcs are going to win. Right. The bad guys are never going to be in any danger of losing. And in fact, they're not even going to take very many losses, because indeed, one of the whole points of the Dagor Aglareb in the text is that it proves orcs are no match for the Noldor. Right. I mean, the orcs, like, they can line up as many orcs as they want, and the Noldor are going to cut through them like somebody harvesting grain is the metaphor, right? Of how they cut down the orcs in front of them. So there is, if that is what's, and I agree, that is how the text describes it. But if we depict that, we are going to have a battle with no drama.
So I would counter that by saying that there hasn't actually been a lot of fighting between the Noldor and the orcs before. We had the Sons of Feanor coming in the Dagon Nuin Gileath, and wiping out the orcs when they first arrived there. But the orcs there were not this kind of numbers that Morgoth is sending out in the Dagor Aglareb, and the Fingolfin's people and Finarfin's people have had very little fighting with the orcs before. So they see a big army of orcs and they are freaking out because they don't really, at this moment, they don't realize their own power against these orcs. They feel like they need to call everyone in that they possibly can because this looks like a big army, and they don't realize that they can cut the orcs down like grain.
But
so there's the Noldor have fear, and it
Sure.
does, in their point of view, they think that the orcs will have a chance of winning.
They might, some of them might, anyway. Fingolfin seemed rather confident when he knocked on the gates of Angband, but, and also don't forget that the Noldor are now in several times the numbers that they were when the Feanorians were a small force when they completely destroyed that initial. And it's true that the army of Fingolfin hasn't fought yet, but A, they're kind of spoiling to, and B, they're bigger. They're more numerous, so the numbers are not actual. Anyway, but in addition, all of that is kind of beside the point. It may well be that some of the Noldor are worried, but again, if what we describe is Morgoth is throwing away an orc army just to test them and see what happens, because Nick, I totally agree with you. I think that your assessment of the text is completely right there. That is what is happening in the Dagor Aglareb as it's described in the text. But again, if we depict that, if we depict the battle that you guys have described is not that. Because there are moments when it looks like this army of orcs is going to defeat Fingolfin, Fingin, Angrod, Aignor, and Finrod put together. Right. Well, and that does not happen in the Dagor Aglareb. In the Dagor Aglareb, they pounce on them and they destroy them all, and the orcs run away and they slaughter almost all of them. Right? It's a completely uneventful battle.
There's a few things. When the text makes the comment that Morgoth realized that orcs alone were useless, that's not in reference to the Dagor Aglareb. That's in reference to the attack down the coast on Nevrast.
Which we've combined.
Meant to be a small skirmish. And we've combined them here, so we do have an attack of orcs down the coast that's just orcs to match the text there. But the Dagor Aglareb, while obviously a resounding victory for the elves, was not necessarily a complete no-cost victory. There could be more nuance to the battle that wasn't described in the text. So, make it more of a battle of Minas Tirith in Return of the King, and you get changing perceptions of who's going to win the battle, and then it's more interesting.
So if I could just jump in real quick here. If I were writing the battle the way it's written in the text, the way that I would do, and we actually started setting this up back in an earlier episode when we talked about the relative unpreparedness of Dorthonion. We've been kind of leaning on that a little bit, before we even discussed the Dagor Aglareb ever, because we were kind of preparing for that to be the center of the attack. We were kind of setting this up, and the way that I would write it is that the force would hit Dorthonion. This big force of orcs would hit Dorthonion because they knew it was weak, drawing, and we don't know that Maedhros and Fingolfin are going to show up in time to save them.
Why
right? Because we're not seeing the battle from their point of view. All right, and especially if we have Angrod and Edelas here at Dorthonion, Edelas has had the whammy put on her. We can actually have everything can kind of be the same, and Edelas has put a stop to the messengers from getting out, right? And so Maedhros and Fingolfin's arrival is actually a surprise to.
Would it be? I see. What you actually depicted in the script made perfect sense to me. They're not sure about Maedhros because he's really far away, right? And it turns out that his vigilance exceeds even their expectations of his vigilance, right? But nevertheless, so that's a bit of a question mark for them. Will the Sons of Feanor even know, because they're way the heck over there, as we see on the map?
It turns out that Maedhros knew even before they would have sent the messenger to
But
him.
I loved the line when remember when was it Angrod and Ignor or Angrod and Ethelwas were talking and we're being like, oh, should we send warning to Fingolfin? And the response is, like, he knew at least as soon as we did, you know, that they were marching. There's absolutely no need to send a messenger to Fingolfin. And I can't imagine Angrod and Ignor, if the assault were on Dorthonion, I mean, clearly their response would be, okay, all we got to do is like hold them off for long enough because we know like Fingolfin's going to come in from one side,
Right.
Mathros from the other, and it's going to and it's
Right.
it's a piece of cake so long as we can just keep them off for, you know, long enough, which is of course
Right.
where we position Finrod ultimately.
Right. Unless there's a sleeper agent who can like open their gates or something
Absolutely.
like that.
And the gate opening opportunity, like a literal gate opening opportunity,
Right.
is kind of an attractive option there for the Ethelwas betrayal. I totally agree.
Right.
But
Basically, what I'm saying is that I feel like there are definitely ways that it could have been done that way. Putting it at Minas Tirith does have value in that Minas Tirith is kind of like, if the attack is centered on Dorthonion, where are they going?
Right. No, exactly. Again, if he's throwing away a whole bunch of orcs just to see what happens, I'm not above having Morgoth act that way. I just don't think it makes good cinema, you know, because again, like if we have them win easily, it's kind of, again, you guys showed that. I mean, you have a lot of like to and froing in the battle, and like there are
Right.
moments when it looks really, really black, right? And
Right.
that's good.
And
I think that works really
right.
well. And
Right. And that was specifically in response to there was kind of the way that it's described leaves open this interpretation, and this happens a lot in the Silmarillion, where there are these pitched battles that go on for long periods of time,
Mhm.
and yet these armies don't run out of soldiers, which
Right.
would, like, if you had a battle going on for a week, that's absolutely what would have happened. Like, there's no way that wouldn't happen. So these battles, in order to happen in this way, have to happen in stages, and so that's why that's set up that way.
Right.
And I think that basically, if we had approached it from a more textual standpoint, that we would have arranged it so that that battle stage felt very similar.
Yeah.
In a lot of
I
ways.
guess, like, so for me, the fundamental change, like the fundamental premise of the Dagor Aglareb that I was suggesting, like the core of my you know, outline of the Dagor Aglareb, as we were you know, describing it, is, let's say Morgoth actually has an objective, rather than saying he's just, again, because, you know, so I was choosing to deviate from the text in this way for the purposes of making this battle more raising the stakes of this battle, because I felt that showing it on screen would be kind of boring, and B would be, again, it's one of those things which, I mean, how long does he spend describing the Dagor Aglareb?
Not very long.
Right?
Yeah,
you know,
no,
so
it's not long.
exactly. Again, it's the kind of thing you can do in one paragraph. It's fine. Again, this is not like me saying I think that part of the Silmarillion sucks. I'm just saying I think it's one paragraph in, you know, the context of the Silmarillion. Yeah. And if we're going to spend the kind of time, anyway, so my suggestion is, let's not do that. Let's not have it be a really easy, because especially since this is the climactic, this is the battle of the season, right? This is the most dramatic moment of the season in this way. So the most action we're ever going to have. I know we're going to get Glaurung, but still, even that's kind of a minor league deal compared to this, right?
Yeah.
So this is the big battle.
Honestly, yeah, my attitude about this particular point was not like, this was not something that I felt particularly strong about where the battle happened.
Right.
Like it ultimately, it didn't matter. I knew that we can make that work.
Yeah.
I think the issue stems from this. Obviously,
the issue for me is not about the place either, or rather, I mean, kind of indirectly. The issue for me is about the purpose, is about what is happening here. And
well, because once you make it a legitimate,
once Morgoth has an objective, a real objective, not just a test.
Right. Then I understand why you like that. That's where the idea of we should have Balrogs there comes from, because like why would he not send them? So
why
Well,
chivalry? Like I'm gonna do this battle with one hand behind my back because it seems fair. I mean,
So I can tell you. So why don't we real quick get any of the hyperbole off the table? That being that neither of us think that Balrogs are either invincible or fragile. I would say that nobody thinks any of those things, right?
Well, before we talk about the Balrogs, though, can I say one thing about
Yeah.
the location real quick?
Sure.
So, what I noticed in the text is that the dagger Aglarab, the way it begins as a thrust against Dorthonion, and then they break through both the Pass of Syrian and Maglar's Gap, is basically what happens in the dagger Bradalak, just less effective. So Morgoth's attacking pattern is the exact same as what he's going to do later in the dagger Bradalak. He's just testing it, making cryo with his orcs.
That's why I wanted to change the location, because I don't want it to look exactly the same both times, except this time with fire. Like, I mean, yeah, exactly. That was the number one thing that I was wanting to avoid, is that that this would be a more limited, because it looks like. I don't want to make Morgoth look dumb.
Positions that you need to capture in Valyrian if you want to take over southern Valyrian from the north, and that is the Pass of Syrian and Maglar's Gap, so you can get through. Because you can send armies across Dorthonion, but it's a highland, it's mountains. You're going to have to get your armies up onto the highland and then down into the rest of Valyrian, so that
and then hope that the spiders don't eat them all.
Pass of Syrian and Maglar's Gap.
Absolutely.
But you don't want Angron and Agnor to split off and go defend those areas. You want to keep them focused and fighting somewhere. So you attack Dorthonion and then get everyone to come fight in Dorthonion and then try to break through in the two strategic locations that you need to capture southern Valyrian.
I think two things. I totally agree. Absolutely. I mean, that's why, and I thought that you guys did a really good job of explaining and setting up the strategic value of the pass of Syrian and of Minas Tirith in particular, because so I mean, and therefore Minas Tirith is a brilliant, I mean, is an excellent limited objective for Morgoth to be trying to obtain. But here's the other thing, Gothmog, right? We reminded everybody of the rivalry between Gothmog and Sauron. If the Dagor Aglareb is going to be a failure from Sauron's perspective, from Morgoth's perspective, and frankly, I mean, it's going to be a big victory by the elves. So from Morgoth's perspective, it's either, Nick, as you were saying first, he's not really trying to win, so it's no big deal. He's playing a longer game, right? So he was just, this is the elves feel good about themselves, but whatever, he doesn't care. His ends have been served, right? If we're not going to play it that way, and I don't want to play it that way, if we want him to actually be attempting to achieve an objective, the Dagor Aglareb is going to be an utter and embarrassing and humiliating failure for the bad guys. Whom do we want that humiliation to fall on? Me? I don't want it to be Morgoth. I don't want Morgoth to look like an idiot. I want to make Gothmog my patsy for that, right? Gothmog I'm willing to make look like an idiot, because we've kind of said that Gothmog is an idiot, right? So if Gothmog is the one who is no, let's do this, right? Sauron is doing his ornate, complicated, and useless things with these elvish prisoners, as you guys had that set up, right? If Gothmog is the one taking the lead and give me a bunch of orcs and we're going to charge out, and Sauron keeps needling me about how useless the orcs are and everything and whatever, but I'm going to do this. So if the Dagor Aglareb is a failure for the bad guys, which it is, I'd want it to be Gothmog's failure, not Sauron's failure. Or sorry, not Morgoth's failure. Rather.
Yeah,
Morgoth's failure.
I would say, instead of having it be either Gothmog's failure or Morgoth's failure, let's make it Sauron's failure. Because what has happened is Morgoth went away in episode 2, and he sort of said whoever is the best should be the one in charge of England while I'm gone. He comes back and he sees what Gothmog has done, and he sees what Sauron has done, and he is most impressed by what Sauron has done.
Right.
And
so why should Sauron? Why should Sauron? So two problems there. First, why should Sauron Sauron should come out of this season looking good. Why doesn't he? Why can't we have him come out of the season looking good? Why should any of the failure of this attach to him? And besides which, this attack is totally out of character for Sauron.
Yeah,
this is exactly the kind of thing he's not done. This is a Gothmog move. Let me take a bunch of people and charge down.
Effort between Gothmog and Sauron if we want to have Sauron commanding the orcs. However,
I don't want him to be commanding
Sauron
the orcs.
is using Ethos. He's using his prisoners that he's intentionally had get rescued in order to further divide the Noldor.
Yeah.
So he is very much trying to achieve the strategic objective in order to help get the orc armies to achieve their goal.
But it does fail ultimately.
But it fails. And it fails badly, and he's not about the orc armies. He doesn't even care. He doesn't even like the orc armies. He speaks derisively of
which
the orc
is why
armies.
he doesn't care about using them to make trial of the strength of his enemies. He can have as many orcs
Why should
killed
it
as
be
he
his
wants,
strategy? What's
focused on the
Gothmog
bigger
doing?
picture, driving them apart.
What's Gothmog's job? What's his role? What is he doing? What's he been doing with himself? We know what Sauron's been doing. Sauron's been doing interesting things and accomplishing accomplishments, right? What's Gothmog been doing?
Gothmog's been getting orcs to survive sunlight.
Okay.
Ineffectively.
Yeah. Well,
largely.
now that there's a cloud cover,
which was not of his doing necessarily. But anyway, okay, that's fine. But seriously, that's it. So what on earth leg does Gothmog have to stand on in making fun of how little Sauron has accomplished? If he's done literally nothing and never does anything. I mean, he ceases even to be an antagonist to Sauron if he doesn't ever take the lead, if he never has a plan. And again, if there's any plan in season 4 that has Gothmog's name on it, it's
prisoners and stuff that he does with them is ineffective, and his attempts with the orcs are going to be much more effective than what Sauron is doing. So he believes that what he is doing is more of an accomplishment. Morgoth and Sauron don't see what he's doing as an accomplishment, even though he does.
Well, it's not. I mean, he hasn't really accomplished anything, right?
Can I slow this down?
He's not smart enough to realize that.
Okay, I mean, yeah. I guess.
Okay.
I guess I don't know.
Right.
I'm not willing to make him quite that stupid, perhaps, but I don't know. I mean, sorry, Nick, go ahead.
So here's the thing.
Yeah.
If Gothmog, if the attack is Gothmog's idea.
Yeah.
Okay, that's fine. Let's say that we do that.
Okay.
Okay. We have definitely shown Gothmog leading soldiers while not actually being active in the battle and on the front lines in the past. Now, if we're putting this on Gothmog, it's not unreasonable to have him leading from behind so that we never actually see him on the battlefield, so nobody has to die, and Gothmog is not himself in harm's way as a battleship would be piercing a fleet of destroyers, even though a battleship is easily able to destroy probably a hefty number of destroyers. They send battleships out with supporting fleets for a reason.
Sure.
And I think that...
Okay. So first of all, he's not the only Balrog, right?
Right. Yeah.
He's invested in this victory. And again, if you are sending out your army to achieve a real objective, like with the intention of winning, right? And you leave it. Yes, you escort your battleships, but you don't leave them behind. They are in the battle still, right? They accompanied. Yeah. This isn't just send a troop of Balrogs.
So are you concerned about having Balrogs only be in the second wave and not in the first wave?
I'm concerned about, again, I don't want the battle to seem... So there are several consequences to leaving the Balrogs out of this battle. Again, if we are going to say they're trying to win, I see no explanation. I mean, if I were watching this show, I would be like on internet chat sites immediately afterwards saying that was so stupid. Why didn't the Balrogs fight? Just like, I mean, one of my chief complaints, I didn't share a lot of people's complaints about the final seasons of Game of Thrones, but one of my chief complaints was like, hey, like I thought the Unsullied were the greatest warriors ever, and now they're like getting beaten one-on-one by schmoes on the battlefield. What the heck? Like, why are we sandbagging this army that we spent so long building up, right? And that's the same reaction I would have if, especially, I mean, so, Gothmog or anyone is like, okay, we're going to have this battle, I'm going to charge in, but like, we have this one weapon, we have these like super heavy infantry troops, which are completely devastating. We know the orcs get toasted by the Noldor, but we know that the Balrogs can take out a whole bunch. So yeah, but no, let's leave them behind for reasons, right? Like it does that. I would have a serious problem with that. It just doesn't, to me, it seems either too contrived or it makes the bad guys look stupid. And less of a threat, therefore. And also, it deprives the good guys' victory of some of its glory, I think, if they're only beating the B squad of the bad guys. If they're not playing against the A team. The second,
well, what they are playing against is Sauron's forces. So they are fighting vampires, and they are fighting werewolves, and they are fighting trolls, and they might even be fighting Sauron himself. And so if we play on the rivalry between Sauron and Gothmog, and we say that Morgoth saw what Sauron was doing as the best, and was kind of like, Gothmog, Sauron knows what he's doing, he should be the one to use these orcs however he wants to do. And so what Sauron does is he makes trial of his enemy's strength, and he sends out this big wave of orcs. He doesn't send the Balrogs out because he doesn't get along with the Balrogs, and he can't command the Balrogs. Yeah. Even if Morgoth says to Gothmog, you're under Sauron's command, Gothmog probably isn't going to do what Sauron wants. So Sauron is going to do everything he can to keep Gothmog and all his Balrogs back in Angband, out of his way, so he can get the battle done as he wants it to be done.
But that's
I can tell you, I'm definitely more concerned about Sauron's safety on the battlefield than I am the Balrogs. That's
me too.
And definitely. I'm slightly confused as to Sauron's motivations and all of that.
I'm more than slightly confused about that. Yeah, I mean, this seems to me a sharp departure from Sauron's character and his motives and his intentions and plans that we've built up all through the season.
Okay, to this point, the orc armies are commanded by Bulldog.
Bulldog directly, right.
Yeah, he moves orcs around.
Right.
And then Bulldog answers to Gothmog.
Yes.
Like, that is the chain of command that we have set up, and we're probably not going to change it. Now, Thorin Gwethel, Drogluin, and Tevildo all answer to Sauron. Yes. And that's his guys.
He's got all the irregular troops. He's got the werewolves, he's got the vampires, he's got the cats. Absolutely.
Exactly. So if you have an army of orcs, it's not answering to Sauron, and it is answering to Gothmog, unless there's something very unusual going on that we would have to explain.
Exactly.
And set up. And we're not going to show Angband at all in this episode, really, because the whole point is the elves reacting to this darkness showing up and these armies coming out of the darkness. Oh yeah, the entire episode's in darkness.
And if hooray, more darkness. And if Gothmog is not acting here, he will never act in this whole season. And therefore we don't any longer have a functional rivalry between Sauron and Gothmog, because Gothmog's not doing anything. Not on screen. He's playing no part of the plot of the entire season. You see what I mean? But if this is him, if this is not Sauron, if this is him, and besides, it doesn't feel like Sauron. This is not how Sauron acts. At least not how we've shown him acting all the way through. Even back in season 3, when we had the attack on Beleriand, Sauron was running this much more clever campaign, which involved like making treaties with Shelob and the spiders and stuff like that. Whereas Bulldog was just leading the orcs down in their invasion, which had a devastating effect on the Green Elves. But anyway, it's still we had Bulldog smashing his way down, right, and succeeding in smashing a lot of the Green Elves. But that was not Sauron, and that was never really Sauron's gig. And it's become less of his gig. I mean, he's defined himself in part, and that rivalry with Gothmog is defined in part by his distancing himself from the orcs. And he's making fun of the orcs. He doesn't command them. He wouldn't do this. This isn't how he would act. He's got his plan. His plan is a subtle, devious plan. His plan is he's going to bring down, he's working to bring down the Noldor from within. Right? Yeah. It's going to be Bulldog who's going to be like, and just like he was saying to Sauron about Ethelos, right? Just break her, right? Whatever, you're wasting your time. Just do it like this. Get a hammer and do it like this, right? And that's what this battle is. Like, I mean, like the Black Arrow is the hammer that Gothmog is going to bring in to try to smash the Noldor. And I think that Morgoth lets him do it because there's a non-zero chance of success. He might win, or if winning is defined as seizing, I don't know, like maybe seizing Minas Tirith and making it into an island of horror, right? Right there in the middle of Beleriand, and creating this potential open access to the rest. I mean, there's a real objective that might be attained by Gothmog and his hammer, right?
But
so that makes sense to me.
Capturing that one island would be more of a Sauron objective, because one, that's what he does later, and also it's a smaller, more strategic thing, which I think would be the kind of thing he would want to do. He wouldn't want to push all the elves. So if this is going to be an attack on Minas Tirith, then a smaller directed attack would be much more Sauron style than attacking all of Dorthonion, which would be Gothmog style, like we see in the Dagger of Bragollach.
But his style...
Also, Sauron's... Yeah. The fact that he doesn't usually command the orcs could help explain why the orcs don't do so well. So if Morgoth has told Sauron, you need to attack, or Sauron has gone to Morgoth and said, I want to capture Minas Tirith, and Morgoth has said, sure, here's an army, and just takes Gothmog's army and pretty much gives it to Sauron, then Sauron will not be used to commanding the orcs. The orcs won't really be answering to him. Like they kind of have to, because they're like slaves and they have to do what Morgoth says. But because their loyalties lie more with Balrog and with Gothmog, and like with their individual commanders rather than with the main figurehead, which is Sauron, then that could explain why they are less effective in this battle than they will be in the Dagger Bragollach when they're being commanded by Gothmog, who is supposed to be in command of them.
I don't know if suggesting like military ineptitude on Sauron's part is necessarily like. Honestly, I'm fine with Gothmog commanding the. It does seem to me more like Gothmog
having Gothmog commanding the defeat. Yeah,
but yeah. However, I do think that with like even the way that the battle is written, that using that right, that template, Fingolfin and like. It can still look like Fingolfin and his people are going to get overwhelmed by these tremendous numbers of extremely well-equipped orcs against a relatively inexperienced group of even the Calaquendi, who are slaughtering them wholesale. But there's just so many of them. Like it's like fighting zombies, right? Like there's just so many of them. They just keep piling up, and you kill them, and they're just climbing the mountains of dead orcs to get to you still. Right?
That can work.
The
numbers would have to be real huge, but
yeah. I agree. Yeah. And I definitely think that like having Sauron command it would require explanation. Like we'd have to go back into Angband and have those scenes where we're explaining what he's even doing out there. I think that having him in command there would definitely be confusing for the audience.
And in doing that, we utterly emasculate Gothmog. I mean, he's been demoted, functionally. I mean, Morgoth has agreed to giving his army to Sauron, which like, someday is going to happen.
But then when Sauron is defeated, when the Dagger Aglareb does not go as planned, it does not succeed, and it does not accomplish what Sauron wanted it to accomplish, then Sauron is the one who is demoted, and Gothmog is the one who rises and then takes command for the Dagger Bragollach.
But I guess fundamentally, I don't want Sauron demoted. I don't want Sauron to lose yet. I want Sauron's campaign and career to be on the rise until he runs into Luthien and Huon, and then he comes crashing down. And the fall is the more spectacular because he's the rising superstar of the bad guys still.
Right. All he does is win.
All he
pretty
does is
much.
win until he meets a girl and a dog.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah. And I'm fine with that. I don't think necessarily having Gothmog in command of that army necessitates that he's there on the front line.
I again, when we say front
I understand
lines, back
I
lines,
understand.
If he's in command, Balrogs are going to be in combat. I can't see any reason against it. I mean, in the satirical version of episode 9, which I enjoyed, we had elves making fun of the Balrogs running away. In the version where the Balrogs don't go, I would have the elves and Sauron both making rich fun of the Balrogs for not. I mean, they were being accused of cowardice for running away. How much more cowardly is it for them not even to dare to go?
I'll tell you that
their retreat can be handled so that it doesn't look like cowardice. In fact, I think their retreat could be handled in a way which makes them actually look pretty freaking terrifying if we do it right. Let me just tell you briefly what my view of a Balrog retreat would look like. Okay. My view of a Balrog retreat is they see that the orcs are going to lose, right? They see that the battle is lost. So they turn and they cut their way through their own troops. They leave and they show complete pitilessness and ruthlessness, cutting through both their own troops and the elves, and retreating, so that we see they don't care about the orcs. We can see their absolute mercilessness, and their both willingness and ability to stomp on everybody who gets in there, because they say, well, okay, so this isn't this battle isn't working out, we are withdrawing, and they leave, and they throw the rest of the orcs into and they whip the rest of the orcs into the battle to attack so the elves can't pursue them, because the Balrogs first cut their way out of the battle and then drive all of their reserves up, because they don't care if all the orcs die, right? And they
wouldn't have a problem using the orcs to make trial their enemy's strength, so that they could then prepare for their next big battle that they're planning to have.
It's no trial. They lost. I mean, they're going to lose the battle, right? They lost the battle, but they don't have to run, like physically run away. They don't have to show cowardice at all. What they show is like ruthlessness, complete ruthlessness of command. They're smart enough to see this battle is lost. We've lost this battle. So we're leaving. And in leaving, we are going to, without a hint of conscience or concern, leave the rest of our troops to die, and throw them all into a battle which we know they can't win because we're leaving, right? And so in order to cover our retreat, we're going to withdraw and go back to Angband. And we're going to leave, we're going to force really all of the orcs to die, because hopefully maybe even they'll kill some elves, whatever, but it's fine. Whatever. We lost the battle today. We're leaving. But again, they're not like running, like holding their skirts as they go off the battlefield. We certainly do not have to depict it that way. They could look really intimidating, leaving, and really ruthless and merciless, as they depart. So yeah, I don't think that them retreating is any kind of a necessary loss. Whereas them staying back home because they're afraid to expose themselves on the battle line, I don't see how we reconcile.
Well, they're not afraid, but they have been commanded to stay home, or
Why?
they are
By whom?
staying home
Why?
because of the rivalry with Sauron.
But then they're idiots.
And the reason they're staying
Morgoth's an
home is
idiot,
because Morgoth is playing the long game, planning for the Dagger Bragollach, in which he's going to have not only Balrogs, but also Glaurung. So they can hint at there is a secret project going on, and this is not the main attack. This is a test, and we're working on this secret project.
Well, they don't want to start the secret project until after the failure of this battle.
Right. They wouldn't be starting the secret project yet. But anyway, yeah, no, I mean,
and we don't want to show Angband in this episode, so we have to do all this from the elves' perspective.
Right.
And we can't show the machinations of the enemy in episode 9. If we did something up in episode 8, we could.
Right.
But episode 9 is strictly elves' perspective.
Nick, I want to go back to the thing.
Is
Sorry,
the scene where we show Rogran being captured in Angband, and that's what I did in both of the scripts. I think is I had him waking up as a prisoner and just catching like the tail end of a conversation between Sauron and Gothmog, where like you sort of get an idea of what was going on with the command and like why the battle lost and their reaction to that, which is this wasn't a big deal that we lost because we were working on a new project and there's something big coming. And that can either be referring to Glaurung, which is in development, or it can be referring to Min and Morgoth's work with Min, because Morgoth knows that he has corrupted some men and they are going to fight for him. Like he isn't expecting the Yadain to come because they were the ones who were like sort of the rebels and they broke away and that's why they're going to ally themselves with the elves. But Morgoth knows that the people of Born Ulfang are coming and they will be on his side. So he's expecting to have
that's certainly
and dragons and stuff. So he is not.
Yeah, that's certainly a teaser for later, but that doesn't answer the questions about how the battle was planned and operated and who was in charge, which needed to be clear on screen during the battle.
Yes.
Like, you can have a surprise at the end for a teaser of what to look forward to next, but
yes.
that doesn't answer the battle questions.
And I certainly agree that Morgoth's perspective is like he's not like demoralized by the Dagor Aglareb, right? Because he does, Rhiannon, as you say, he has the longer view. From Morgoth's perspective, the attack by Gothmog would be, you know, in the context of his big plans, this is a limited offensive to achieve a limited objective, right? Which would have been good, which had a serious chance of succeeding, as we show in the episode, right? I mean, if things didn't go well, if the Fëanorns don't show up, et cetera, then the good guys could have lost. So it has a reasonable chance of succeeding. If it succeeds, excellent. Then it makes his future plans that much easier, right? If they have driven a wedge between the elves there, right? But if it doesn't succeed, no big deal, right? And it's very small risk for him to let it happen, right? And when it doesn't work, he's okay because he does have, and Morgoth's okay because he does have bigger plans. Gothmog is going to come back with egg on his face. He doesn't look like a coward, but he does look a little bit like a fool, especially to Sauron, and that seems to me fine, desirable, in fact. He is, we don't want to undermine Gothmog too badly, but again, I kind of want Sauron to win. I want Sauron to be in the ascendant. So having the two of them, you know, both attempting something in their own idioms, right? And Sauron with his devious, capture plan and stuff, and espionage, and Morgoth Gothmog rather, with his sledgehammer. They've both attempted something. Gothmog's. It's not like it was it was mostly a total failure. If he succeeds in killing somebody important, it's not a complete loss. But anyway, that's okay. So he, but whatever. He loses. He comes up second best, and Sauron ends up looking even better and strong, and has taken a strong lead in the rivalry against Goth. The rivalry is still there, but he is clearly in the lead now. That seems to me like a desirable place for us to kind of come to in bad guy headquarters at the end of the season. Nick, I'm going to come back to the thing that you said before about like trying to avoid hyperbole, and I agree with that, and I don't want to sound like I don't want to be too hyperbolic. I know that's kind of a vice of mine in general when I'm arguing about something. As my wife has pointed out on more than one occasion. So in the last 20 years. So I'm not saying. I know, right?
Pointing out your flaws.
I know.
That's impossible.
Perfect fairness and accuracy. Yeah. But anyway, it's certainly. I mean, in neither case, if the Balrogs stay home or if the Balrogs come into the battle and withdraw from it at the end, in neither case do they in neither case are they stuck merely looking like cowards. Like, to say they're going to look like cowards is hyperbole in either case.
Yes.
Either side has a risk. Like there's risk that has to be managed of how the Balrogs are going to come across. And to me, I think I don't see any gain to the Balrogs, any potential gain. There's a risk in both cases. If they're there, there are two gains that I see from that. First, it makes the battle much more threatening, and the loss of the chance of the orc army winning seemed greater. That's one gain of the Balrogs being there. The second gain is that I do think, again, that their withdrawal can be managed in a way which makes them look like not the greatest battle commanders in the world, but I'm fine with that conclusion because it's kind of true. But also which still makes them look powerful and merciless and totally ruthless, which also seems to me to we have an opportunity to do character development for them, to show what they're capable of, not just as thugs, but like in their characters, right, in their in what they're willing to do. So some interesting progress could be made in the depiction of the Balrogs in that way. So again, a potential gain. It could not come off well. Of course, we could fail, but I think there are potential gains. I can't see anything like the same potential gains in leaving the Balrogs at home. I don't see what we gain. Either in the depiction of the Balrogs themselves, because again, it seems to me only a weakness that needs to be managed. We have to find a good enough excuse for them to have stayed at home and not participated in the battle. And maybe we can. I'm sure we probably could come up with one. But again, that's not a positive gain. It's just a management of potential loss, right? I don't see anything positive that comes from their being left behind, other than and the only result again is if we put the attack on Sauron, then it weakens Sauron, which feels to me premature. I don't want to weaken Sauron yet. I don't want to have him lose. I want to have if anyone's going to lose, again, Gothmog's my patsy. If somebody's going to end up looking bad, I want it to be Gothmog in this whole exchange. Anyway, so that's, and I think that was, and as far as the elves are concerned, again, if there are only two, if there are no Balrogs there, if Balrogs are there, then we don't need to go very far for an explanation of why there's a serious chance that the armies of Fingolfin, Fingon, Angrod, Agnor, and Finrod are all going to be defeated. If the Balrogs are not there, the only explanation would be absolutely overwhelming numbers. And I don't know that we necessarily want to play that. That is as much a deviation from the text as sending Balrogs. Right? The numbers of the orcs weren't overwhelming. It was a trial, right?
Well, they weren't so overwhelming as to overwhelm the entire
succeed in overwhelming
the entire combined might of the Noldor, who also happened to catch them in a pretty bad spot, strategically speaking. So there's that. But that said, and I think that one of the my biggest concerns rolling into this was that the Balrogs are either so effective that they have to my biggest problem is they're too effective, that they're so effective that they could get that they're so much more effective than everybody else around them, that they can get isolated, and they know they can be killed because they've had their people killed.
This is exactly the next thing I wanted to talk about. Morgoth
knows that they can be killed, the elves probably do.
Do they?
Well, yeah, because if the Valar told them about the War of the Powers,
but no elves killed anybody then. I mean, it's one thing to say Tulkas can kill somebody, and it's another thing to say that you can kill somebody if you're an elf. Right. So,
right. But we don't.
Right. The viewers don't know if the elves can kill a Balrog.
Exactly. The viewers have no idea that Balrogs can die.
Well, the viewers have no idea that elves
can kill Balrogs. Right.
And that's fair. That's
but,
fair.
See, exactly. We need to establish that, though. See, that's another potential gain. This is why I think, again, we gain something else by having the Balrogs retreat, right? Again, they don't have to look bad in doing it, but it does plant a seed, right, for the viewers. Like, hey, like, could they, like, are they not indestructible? Because, like, we're gonna destruct them. Like, that's gonna happen, right? And have we ever shown,
Balrog's retreat from the field, yeah.
Have we ever shown anyone, like, of higher than elven stature being killed by an elf? I don't think we have.
Elves haven't done a lot of killing.
They haven't done a lot of killing at all, right? But yeah,
Vampires and werewolves they have killed.
Yes, we have seen them shoot down some of Thranduil's vampires.
That's not the same, but
no, it's not the same because they're half animals. I mean, there's a real question as to whether the werewolves are above or below elves on the Great Chain of Being.
Right. That's fair, but
Balrogs are a different story.
Here that Balrogs might possibly be able to be killed by elves because they're retreating. I really don't think that fits with the purpose of the Dagor Aglareb, because we want to make the Dagor Aglareb a big, exciting battle because it's towards the end of the season here, and it should be exciting. But we want to make sure that when we show the Dagor Bragollach, it is much, much, much worse. And the Dagor Aglareb is supposed to make the elves overconfident. So they shouldn't see Balrogs on the field. They should just see a lot of orcs that they can wipe away really easily. They should think that they can face whatever Angband can throw at them.
But they haven't faced everything. They know that it can throw Balrogs at them. Exactly.
Because the Feanorians have fought the Balrogs before.
So they're going to be they're going to be less overconfident because they're going to be like,
because this was just a trial.
No, because they're all going to say, like, well, on the one hand we won that battle, but on the other hand it was only orcs, right? Like, we know. I mean, again, Maedhros is going to be like, dude, trust me, they did not bring their A game to that battle, so don't get too overconfident, right? Because they know, like, there weren't even Balrogs on the field. Right?
And Maedhros
that's what I have him
also
doing
personally
in the version where there are no Balrogs. Is Maedhros is absolutely like, there are Balrogs, don't forget about the Balrogs.
In which case they're not going to be overconfident.
I just want to remind everybody that this would not be the first time that we've seen Balrogs retreat from the field of battle and retreat from the face of the Calaquendi. So it's not like we haven't already planted this seed.
Okay.
So I'm just throwing that out there. It's not like we haven't already suggested that the elves could threaten the Balrogs in significant enough numbers.
But again, I totally agree that the outcome of this battle should be overconfidence by the Noldor. And that overconfidence is only going to be increased if the Balrogs were there and they still won. If the Balrogs weren't there, they're not going to be overconfident. They're going to be, I mean, there might be some, but if they are overconfident as a result of just beating a bunch of the losers, literally the lowest cannon fodder that Angband has to throw out there, they're fools if they become overconfident. I don't want them to be fools. I want them to be reasonably overconfident, and defeating an army led by Balrogs could very plausibly lead to reasonable overconfidence.
One of the characters who needs to be overconfident next season is Fingolfin.
Yes.
And we cannot have Fingolfin be an idiot. That's correct.
Cannot have Fingolfin. And yes, if he comes away from a battle in which they defeat only orcs with like super confidence that they can face anything that Angband throws at them, then he's a fool. I mean, that's foolish. That would be, especially when he's never met Balrogs before. Fingolfin hasn't. If they don't come out now, he will never have seen them.
He saw Angband's forces when the sun rose, which means he saw trolls turn to stone in the sun.
Okay.
I don't recall if we had Balrogs.
If we had Balrogs then, yeah or not. But
so how about this?
Yeah.
How about we have the Balrogs can be out there, they can be fighting, but they will not be at the front lines. Now, there's precedent for this. Well, it's not really precedent. It happens after, but in the Nirnath Nordiad, Morgoth sends out all his orcs first, and then he sends out Glaurung, and then he sends out the Balrogs. And that's why the Balrogs are the ones fighting people in. That's why near the end of the battle, Fingin gets killed by the Balrogs, because the Balrogs come out at the end after the Noldor have like broken up to the gates of Angband. Then Morgoth sends out the Balrogs. So what if we sort of do the two forces like we have in the episode already, and we have the first force is just orcs, and the second force is a bunch of orcs in the front and some Balrogs in the back. So when it really, really looks bad for the elves in the battle, the moment they get the news Turgon isn't coming, the moment they get the news that the Feanorians aren't coming, they see the Balrogs on the horizon, and presumably you can see those guys from pretty far off because they're like on fire and they're much bigger than the orcs. And then when we have the Feanorians show up, with them not expecting them to show up, and the Balrogs won't expect them to show up because like Sauron will have assured them that like Ethelos took care of the messenger and the Feanorians won't be coming, but they show up anyway. That's when the Balrogs retreat, because we've shown the Balrogs retreating from the Feanorians before, because that was what they did when Feanor died, is the sons of Feanor came down and they scared all the Balrogs away so they could get their dad out and he could just collapse in ash like he does. And then we could also be setting up why Morgoth wants to divide the houses of the Noldor and the Nirnaeth and Nordiad, because he goes through all this like subterfuge and machinations to keep Mythos from meeting up and uniting with Fingin. So if we establish that the Feanorians, their armies are a threat to the Balrogs, and the Balrogs perceive the Feanorians as a threat, which is why they retreat from them in the Dagor Aglareb, then that's why Morgoth
when they
wants
weren't
the
supposed to be there at all.
Balrogs in the Nirnaeth.
Like Sauron told us there wouldn't be any Feanorians here.
Okay, well, this brings up a separate question that I have, but let me put the separate question aside for a second. I am okay. I mean, I'm more than okay. It seems to me perfectly logical that Balrogs, an army of orcs with a few Balrogs with them, the Balrogs would primarily be using their flaming whips to whip the orcs on into battle from behind. That seems to me, I don't think Balrogs are particularly lead by example types of people, right? So I have no problem with them being primarily
unless it's fun.
Unless it's fun, right? I have no problem with the Balrogs being primarily slave drivers and not champions. However, I think that I don't see, objectively speaking, any good reason to not have to have the Balrogs in the battle and never engaging in the battle. Like, why? Why should we do that?
Because they've come out last, and
but why? Why? So, I mean, setting the Nirnaeth or Nordiad aside for a while, because I'm not sure that we're not going to want to. I mean, on the one hand, the Nirnaeth or Nordiad is one of the most detailed tactical descriptions of a battle that we have in Tolkien's primary published works. His description of the battle at the Fords of Isen is a great deal more, by far the most, and also the Disaster of the Gladden Fields. Both of those pieces from Unfinished Tales are far more tactically detailed. But the Nirnaeth or Nordiad is one of the only places in his published texts where Tolkien actually gives us tactical details of the battlefield, and they're fairly slim. And the tactics that he gives them are super simple. Really, from a military history standpoint, very rudimentary. All of this is to say, and I've had this conversation lots of times with lots of people, Tolkien's works do not demonstrate a very great interest on his part in military tactics. He just doesn't spend much time, or rather, I would say his stories are not, I won't say about him, his stories do not show much interest in the exact tactics of battles. So I'm not gonna worry too much about the tactics as they're described in the Nirnaeth or Nordiad, because I am not at all sure. No, let me say that more forcefully. I feel fairly certain that we're gonna want to monkey with that a little bit when we get there. So I'm not persuaded by the Nirnaeth or Nordiad as a template here, because what we are faced with is the reality of depicting on screen a battle in which the Balrogs are there but never do anything other than whip on the orcs. Which again, it's possible. I'm not saying it's impossible. They would certainly be whipping on the orcs. But again, what do we
Well, they're
gain?
not there for the full battle, and
Why not?
the way I
What do we
want them
gain
to
by
appear
having
would
them not?
be at the very end, at the moment when it seems that all hope is lost and we don't have anyone coming. That's when we see the Balrogs. The Balrogs are going to start attacking now.
Yes, and that effect would be even more further amplified if at that moment the Balrogs come in and start chucking elves all over the place.
If they actually attacked.
Exactly. Yes.
Because the real issue is that if we put Balrogs in a battle situation and then don't let them do anything, they look kind of useless.
Yeah.
And we could not have them at all, or we could use them in the battle, but to have them there and then not use them,
that's what I
is going to disappoint the viewer.
I don't
than
see
anything.
how we get it. Yeah, it feels to me
if
like
if it's Gothmog
gun on
alone,
stage, it's
I
never
feel
fired.
less like that's a problem.
Agreed.
But I mean, here's the thing. Like, ultimately, I feel like what we've constructed, which I guess we'll get into next time, works. It addresses some of the feelings of dread that I had when I was listening to the original discussion. Because what was being this, and because you may remember, I kept asking you questions like, all right, come on, like, you have to give me something here. I need to know how you're seeing this working, because the way that you're describing it makes zero sense to me whatsoever.
Right, I get it.
Excuse me. And so it addresses some of those things while still maintaining the things that nobody likes.
Right.
So, like what we've created in the outline is something that I can live with. I still disagree. I'm not convinced, some might say, that it's necessary to have a cadre of Balrogs active in the battle.
I wouldn't say it's necessary. I just think that the gains outweigh the losses, or rather the gains of that outweigh by far the gains of leaving the Balrogs home.
And I definitely see your case for that. Like, I'm not going to deny that there are certainly benefits. I think that a lot of the same effects can be created in other ways, but that's it, like, ultimately, I think that what we have is usable.
So here's one other thing that I would add. I know, Rhiannon, I know that you have been waging a long-term campaign you've been campaigning harder to save Angrod even than Nick did to save the lamps in season 1. And one thing that I will say is that my opinion on the death of Angrod has been changed to a certain extent by your scripts. And I'll tell you the extent to which it's been changed. I still would have no problem killing him off. I still think it would be, I'm still kind of in love with the idea, a little bit in love with the idea of Orodreth being left an orphan. I mean, he's going to be eventually anyway, but I mean here, like losing both his father and mother in one swoop, is something I still kind of like that idea. However, the reason we nominated Angrod for death in the first place is that it came up from the Balrogs, right? We were going to have Balrogs in the battle, and so we needed somebody to die. And we needed a named person that we know to die, because I still think it's a sensible rule when Balrogs are in battle, a named person dies. I'm not saying we need necessarily 100% bind ourselves to that rule if we decide we want to deviate from it at some point. But again, I think it's fine. That's why Angrod was nominated, because of all of the people, I mean, you look at everybody named on this map, right? Everybody else has jobs they have to do in the future. Angrod is the only one who does not have a specific the Silmarillion text, I mean, does not call for him to do anything. Fingon and Fingolfin have other dates, obviously, right? They're going to be dying in other times in other places. Turgon, obviously, right? Even most of the Feanorians, and Finrod, certainly, he still hasn't even met Beren or Barahir yet. Eignor has a romantic entanglement to get involved in next season, which is going to be super awesome. Angrod is obviously our most disposable of our named characters, but here is the way in which my perspective on this has been changed by reading the script. We're losing Ethelwalls one way or the other, right? Angrod dying or Angrod living, Ethelwalls is dying in this episode. Like, that's definitely happening, right? When we were planning, Ethelwalls was mostly a name to me. I mean, she was like a kind of a concept that we, that we'd been talking about. I mean, when we were just like thinking of like who, she was in the list of the different elf capture scenarios that we were first coming up with. That's what Ethelwalls was to me at that point, right? What you guys have done with her, and Rhiannon especially, how you have developed her character throughout this season, and especially since episode 6, but certainly before that, Ethelwalls is as major a character in the show. For viewers of the show, Ethelwalls is as major a character as Angrod, more in some ways. Well, maybe not more, but at least as much, right? She's at least as important a character by this point, especially with the reflections from Orodreth in episode 8 and everything else and all that beautiful stuff about, the crossing of the Helcaraxa with her and of course seeing her as the herald of Angrod and seeing her training the armies and I mean everything else. Like she's a huge character. Her death would be enough for me. I mean, if
not by Balrog. She has to be killed by Sauron because she is Sauron's pet project. He has been working on her the whole time.
And you don't think Gothmog wants to smash Sauron's pet project?
Oh,
yeah.
No, but you see, we have Eignor breaking his sword, fighting the whatever kills Ethelwalls. And
choose
what?
Balrogs or Angrod? Balrogs or Angrod? Make a choice right now.
Well, so, but here, this brings me back to the question I didn't get to.
Become Narsil. And so if the sword that becomes Narsil is broken in the fighting of Sauron at the moment when Sauron gets named, then it is tied to Sauron.
I love the naming of Sauron, by the way. But hang on a second. So let's because I have a question. Whose hand is inside Ethelwalls' sock puppet? Is it Sauron? I thought it was Morgoth.
Oh, no, Morgoth did the spell, definitely.
Yeah. Morgoth does the spell. Does he delegate to Sauron? I mean, I agree. She's been his project.
Yeah, that's fine.
But Morgoth kind of took over the project.
Controlling him. Like, even in episode 8, Morgoth is the one he's like, what have they been hiding? And then Sauron is the one who issues the next command to Ethelwalls. So, like, at that moment, Morgoth, like, tells her to do one thing, and then Sauron is the one who's directing her.
Yeah.
So like the power is coming from Morgoth, but the commands are coming from Sauron.
See.
And I can make that more clear if it needs to be. That was my intent.
How is he? See, Morgoth's in her head, right? I mean, from that moment when he lays the whammy on her, Morgoth's in her head. I mean, I didn't bat an eye when Sauron gave her a command and she responded. Because, I mean, Morgoth's in her head. Morgoth's also standing right there, right? So that she was pretty tractable at that point seemed to me, I didn't have any problem with that at all. But that Sauron would somehow be remotely inserted into her head after the fact, I totally was assuming, and it seems to me to make most sense, that it's Morgoth. Morgoth has, again, this is part of the reason that I was seeing the parallel with how Morgoth comes home and takes over the Orc project, and then he comes home and takes over the Ethelwalls project. And maybe Sauron, as Maria, as you were arguing, and Nick, I think as you were arguing too, Sauron's more into this one, right? Because on the one hand, Morgoth is kind of like taken over his pet project, but on the other hand, he's like, but I'm not going to pretend that wasn't awesome, because that was awesome, right?
Right.
And I kind of want in on that action. Come to think of it, right? But Morgoth is like, I think we talked about Ethelwast not driving the bus, and we didn't talk at the time about who the bus driver was, but I think Morgoth is the bus driver.
With Anael later on, we'll have Sauron doing his version of mesmerization or whatever.
Right. So I have him doing his like junior league version of the spell
with this
the spell of fairly deep but not quite bottomless dread, right? Yeah.
Right. But in this case, it should still be Morgoth, and it's Morgoth's will.
I think it is Morgoth's will. I mean, it seems sensible that it would be Morgoth's will in this way.
But clearly, the capture of Ethelwast was a Sauron project.
Was a Sauron thing. And Angrod and Ignor, but neither one of them is going to know this, right? They're not going to tell. I mean, Angrod is totally going to blame, would totally blame Sauron? Would he know? He doesn't know. Shoot, I forgot. He doesn't know. He had no idea what happened.
What's that? Who doesn't know?
Angrod.
Angrod doesn't know what happened to Ethelwast.
Nobody knows what happened to Ethelwast, so he's not going to know to blame Sauron.
Right. Well, unless as Rhiannon suggesting that Sauron's there.
Sorry, Nick. Go ahead.
No. If we went with Rhiannon's idea of Sauron being there, that could come up.
Yeah, and switching to Angrod when he kills Ethelwast.
I'm not going to pretend that I didn't like that scene, because I totally did. I really liked that scene. I mean,
and the thing with the eclipse, and her finally seeing the sun, that is Varda's answer to her prayer to protect her husband, because she prayed in episode 6 that Angrod would be safe wherever he was, and like Varda didn't answer, clouds covered the stars, so like the light wasn't helping her. But here, when Ethelwast is dying, in the moment of her death, her prayer is answered and Angrod is saved.
I loved it. I loved that scene. I loved it. And I also loved, separately, the naming of Sauron. But I think I'm wanting to postpone the naming of Sauron, because again, I don't want Sauron to be there. I can't see how Sauron can be there in the battle. I don't see Sauron being present in the battle, and if he's not present, I don't know how anyone would know to blame. I mean, he's to blame, but I don't know how anyone would know to blame him. For what?
Also, we've also named Sauron Balrog.
His forces are fighting. His vampires are fighting. His werewolves are fighting. So it would make sense.
Wait. I have it. I have a solution. Okay. Who? Sauron's already been named Sauron by somebody.
Gothmog.
Anybody remember? Yes.
Gothmog did. Yeah.
Yes. If Gothmog gets a hold of Ethelwast and says Sauron's pet, before he crushes her, and Angrod hears it. Right? At least the name.
Then Sauron he knows.
Right? They don't necessarily know, they don't know who Myron is, but that's when the elves first find out about Sauron. It's the first time they hear of him. And they know that Sauron had something to do with Ethelwast.
What we had Sauron directly interact with the entire camp of Feanor.
Yes, that's true. But he was
false name.
I think he probably would have named himself Myron at the time. I don't see him naming himself Sauron.
Giving himself some other name. Yeah.
But
okay, so separately, so I like both of the Ethelwast death scenes. I like the one that Rhiannon wrote with Angrod and the eclipse. I totally agree. Having Gothmog kill Ethelwast as the named character that gets killed by Balrogs in this scene works for me. She's totally qualifies as a major character at this point to be killed by the Balrog. And I completely agree with you, Marie.
This was our secret trump card, by the way.
For Gothmog to be saying, okay, Yeah, like he would kill her out of spite because she was Sauron's pet project, right? That makes complete sense. And Nick, as you suggested, for him to say that, and it to be overheard so that they would know. Again, I agree. I think that works. Is there a way to kind of marry these things together in some way?
Well, Sauron likes to do things personally. He likes going in and being involved with the elves. So I think it would definitely be possible for him to want to go down and deal with the elves himself. He wouldn't mind going out on the battlefield and facing them. He wouldn't want to fight them the whole time, but he would want to accomplish his one task, which in this case is killing Ethelos.
I don't think he would want to.
But why would he want to kill her? That's the thing.
He plans
is that
yeah, she's useful,
and she's a tool, so she either can break or not. But the idea of having her as a inserted spy is to make use of her long term. To have the villains kill her in the scene requires someone who would spitefully do that anyway, even though she's useful, which, a Balrog would do.
Because even if she breaks enough to reveal to Angrod what she's done, like the person to kill isn't her. The person to kill is Angrod. Right? Like if Angrod's the witness, like that would be the person that Sauron would want to get rid
of. Yes.
Right,
exactly.
Because presumably they can regain control of Etelos and make use of her in the future if the only witness is dead.
If Sauron were to be there and were to witness, yeah, exactly. So he sees Ethelos like overcome the spell enough to confess. His reaction is, okay, let's kill Angrod, let's kill the witness, and we gotta refresh the spell bottomless tread, right? Because it found a bottom apparently, so we need to reassess.
But he would also want to torment Angrod. Like the whole thing that I have him doing, where he switches his face to Angrod's face in view of both Ethelos and Angrod, is purely psychological torture for Angrod.
Yep.
So like he is at this point revealing that he can look like anyone, so you can't trust anyone. You can't trust the prisoners who have escaped, and you can't trust anyone because they could be Sauron in disguise. And that's what he wants to do, is he wants to sow that discord among the elves. He wants them to not trust each other and not trust the prisoners that escape from Angband.
But I think Edelos's betrayal is already going to accomplish that.
And he would like the prisoners to get trusted at first so that he can put all his sleeper agents out there and accomplish stuff and then have the distrust build.
Right. Yeah. No, again, I do think it's, again, I don't disagree as a whole. I mean, and I really like this. This is the real struggle that I have here is, again, I really like the scene that you wrote as it's depicted. I think it's a wonderful scene. But like the larger plot context of it is what I disagree with. I don't see Sauron being on the battlefield. I don't see any. I can give like I could start listing a bunch of reasons for him not to be on the battlefield, and I can't think of very many good reasons for him to be there. And he's going to have other opportunities to follow up, to continue his work. If what we see here is Gothmog smashing his work, that seems to me, and again, that helps to further solidify
the rivalry.
And if anything, it almost allows Gothmog to recoup something from the battle, right? Like, okay, his idea, right, his smash offensive didn't pan out, so he goes back to Angband with egg on his face and that's true, and he's sort of lower than Sauron, but at least he has something he can be like, yeah, well, at least I smashed his little pawn, right? At least I showed how useless that was. He can comfort himself that he accomplished something, right? That he at least stuck it to Sauron.
It kind of makes me think of a line from the 13th Warrior, which I know you said you hadn't watched.
I still haven't. Still on my list, but I still haven't gotten to it.
Anyway, so the line is that any fool can calculate strength. All right. the idea being that the main characters are sending a message to one of their antagonists that just because something is stronger doesn't mean that it's better. Right. And I feel like that message is totally lost on Gothmog, right? In Gothmog's mind, when he crushes Edelas, is that because that tool was so weak, it was useless. Mm-hmm. Like it totally passes by him the value.
Yes.
Of this
because he is like the avatar of the strength doctrine. Gothmog is.
Right.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. That strength doctrine, which of course is one of the things which attracted Myron to Melkor in the first place. Right? He appreciated Melkor's strength. He admired his strength and his willingness to exert that strength rather than withholding the strength. He knows Manwë has strength, but Manwë doesn't use it. Right. And he admired that strength. But like when it's just the strength, right? When it's just the thug power, we see him at odds with it in Gothmog. Anyway, so yes, one of the primary things that I would offer there at the end is that I am willing to say, in the context of the story as you guys have developed it, the death of Angrod feels like overkill. Like it could be overkill. Like it's not needed. It's not needed in this like new world in which Ethelos is almost as great a character, as significant a character as Angrod is. In fact, more so in several dimensions, she's a bigger character than Angrod by this time of the season because we know her better.
We're emotionally more connected to
much more. And Angrod almost indirectly so, right?
We connect to these
we were
characters.
with Angrod for a full episode, then it turned out it wasn't him.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. So
we think we know Angrod and we don't. Exactly.
So I can tell you that when we were discussing this episode, it actually came up that at the end of the day, that if Edelas's death was cool enough, like if we fought tooth and nail all the way up until the point, but if Edelas's death was cool enough that you might, as a consolation prize.
It's not really just intended as a consolation prize.
I definitely feel like we just...
Fair, Angrod. Edelas is enough pathos for this episode.
It's enough pathos. Yeah, no, exactly. It is not a consolation prize. It is an acknowledgement of your achievement with Ethelos. Absolutely.
Is Bree around? I don't want to get yelled at for fridging again.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's like
this actually created a lot of problems when we were working out the wedding of Galadriel and Celeborn, because Galadriel needed someone to stand in as her mother, and like all her female relatives are dead.
Right. It's true. Yeah. No, I mean, it's funny. If anything, it's getting to the point where we would have been fridging Angrod for Ethelos' sake. I mean, it's like, So, it's fine. It's fine. Again, I still don't, in my heart of hearts, I will still confess that I think I see a better net gain from Angrod's death than his life at this point. But it's fine. I mean, hey, you guys did awesome things with Ethelos. I'm sure you can make excellent use of the parole that Angrod had been given.
I just want him to die and brag on what he's supposed to. He can choke on a marshmallow or something. I don't care. He just needs to die. I'm much more willing to. I mean, Tolkien tends to kill off the main Silmarillion characters kind of in waves, often, at least the minor ones, right? I mean, the big ones like Fingolfin and Turgon and Finrod, they all get their big, important deaths, dramatic moments. But Angrod and Ignor are just killed off as a pair. They're just a set. And we can make that a thing. They can both go down in battle together.
No, absolutely. We can make that awesome. No question we can. I'm just saying that's the reason why I'm not attached to making all the deaths happen where they happen, because Tolkien tends to throw away the lives of the lesser characters in bunches. And I don't think that we need to be compelled to bunch them in the same way. Because we are building each one of these characters into much more than Tolkien made of them because of the kind of story he was writing. I would have no problem at all making each one a separate spotlight rather than.
I'm just glad that you didn't just try to kill off Amros again.
Well, you know, that's always the fallback, right? If ever we need somebody to die, there's always Amros. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, except this time, because I think, I honestly think you just didn't think of him.
Yeah.
He's not really there.
He's too fringe. Yeah, exactly. I mean, too fringe to the action here. Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
No,
Sure.
he is kind of like, well, I don't know, somewhere between like a Star Trek red shirt and Kenny from South Park, I guess. But, yeah. All right. It's all good.
Well, I think we can get into the particulars.
Yeah, we can go over some of the particulars, and of course,
especially
the B plot with Turgon. I'd love to talk about that a little more, which we didn't get to, but we can roll that in at the beginning of next time, and then move on to hopefully 10 and 11 as well next time. This is I always knew this was going to be the big debate, so I don't regret going long, and I'm also really glad for the long discussion we had of the spell of Bottomless Dread. Earlier on. Anyway.
So the consensus is you definitely want Gothmog to be the brains behind this battle, and you definitely want Balrogs to be, or lack of brains, and you definitely would like Balrogs to be fighting in this battle in some capacity.
They don't have to be on the front lines.
Right. Or
they
don't need to be in every army.
They
just
don't have to be in every.
present,
They don't have to be leading every
doing
attack.
some fighting.
Just I agree to and you know, Marie, exactly. I was thinking exactly what you said before, that it feels like if we have Balrogs there and they never fight, it's like, you know, the gun on stage that's never fired. At least that's how it would feel to me if I were watching it.
So can you, I'll try to get another episode 9 script written in which there are Balrogs present in the battle. I'm still really in favor of Sauron being the one to kill Ethlos in front of Angrod. So give me some time to work out possible reasons why he might do that. Like I need time to think, like a lot of the things that I bring into these scripts are things that I think of after our script discussions. Sure. So give me some time to think of a way to incorporate that and make those things work together, and I will have another episode 9 script.
Okay.
The third version of the episode 9
The one
script.
thing that I would add to that though is that I don't think there should be werewolves and vampires in the battle in general, because those are Sauron's troops. And if this is Gothmog's initiative, Sauron's not going to lend him his troops. And anyway, Gothmog would disdain Sauron's troops because Sauron's troops are all like sneaky, weird. You know, Gothmog wants
and there's not a lot
bashing
of
troops.
But we do have Rogan getting captured and Ainul getting captured, and they are captured by Sauron's troops because Sauron is trying to capture them. But maybe Sauron could be doing something with his troops where he's operating.
See, now that's a Sauron move. If Gothmog is marching off on his army, right, and he's over there, Sauron, it's not a Sauron move for him to like join the battle essentially as like a subordinate to Gothmog or to try to make Gothmog. No, but it would be a Sauron move for him to look for opportunities, right? Because he would probably think exactly what happens with Rog, right? He's probably going to be like, hey, you know what? I mean. By the way, I love the fact that it's almost Arthel, right? Arthel almost is the one, right, who would have been captured, and Rog's capture is in her place, setting up awesomeness in Gondolin later on. But anyway, really cool. Loved that whole thing. But again, this is exactly Sauron would see potential opportunities here, right? They're probably going to be sending runners. And knowing these Noldor, right, they're not just going to send lackeys, right? One of the captains of the Noldor might well either attempt to come to relieve somebody and expose himself to danger, or they might send, you know, somebody. I mean, look, like Turgon sends Icthelion too. I mean, they often do this, and he would probably know that, right? So yes, it would absolutely be a Sauron move to be like, let's hang around behind Gothmog's smashy army and see what opportunities arise. surprise. So I'm going to have a squad of werewolves standing by just in case we can kidnap any valuable commodities right along the fringes of this battle as they try to communicate back and forth across Ardgallen, right? That is a Sauron move.
That would be a really good reason for Sauron to be there.
For him to be somewhere that's not in the front yet. That's not
in the
way
neighborhood.
In the neighborhood, but it gets him a step closer. I agree. We'd have to see if we could get him up to the lines of the battle, and I still am gonna be if Balrog doesn't get to smash anybody, I'm gonna get a little twitchy though still, so it's that is one danger. I mean, there is a risk if we have Sauron kill Ethelwalh, I might have to repeal the
Then Gottmog kills Angrod, done.
the pardon on Angrod. If we, anyway,
Balrog's a terrifying enough force in this battle, or we make them significant enough. I think we can ignore the Balrog rule in this occasion if we have it. Like, they're obviously something dangerous and something that we should be afraid of.
Maybe.
Or you know what we can do? We can kill off a named orc that we become attached to when he becomes a named character, and that's the Balrog victim.
That's not how the Balrog rule works.
That's not how the Balrog rule works. Yeah, that's not. But anyway,
that's not how the Force works.
That's not how the Force works. All right. Anyway, so we'll go over some of that stuff. We'll look at the new. I'll definitely read the new version of episode 9. And we do have 2 weeks. So we had 2 weeks in a row. We've gotten back on schedule. So our next episode will be, what is it, the 14th now? So it'll be the 28th. No, it won't, because that's Thanksgiving Day.
Yeah.
So it's going to be 3 weeks from now. It's going to be December 5th, right?
December 5th.
Right. Okay.
It's actually the 15th now.
It is. No, it's not. Oh, yeah, technically, whatever. Yeah.
December 5th is the date for the next episode. Next session.
Yeah.
Sorry.
This
reminds me of like Saturday night at Mythmoot, hanging out. Like the last 3 people hanging out around the fire.
Exactly. Right. As you have seen from the way I normally carry on, I don't consider the next day as beginning until dawn. That's when the day begins. So it's still the 14th as far as I'm concerned, whatsoever my calendar might read right now. Yeah. I actively resent my phone apps, which roll over to the next day at midnight. I'm like, darn, I still have 2 hours of my workday left. Don't roll over my calendar yet.
Yeah, I was putting up the episode 13 script technically yesterday, but it felt like it was the day before because I was doing it after midnight.
Right, exactly. All right, well, we will let people go. This has been a long but eventful episode. Thank you for the wonderful discussion. I certainly want to reiterate Nick's point from earlier on, and again, all of the sort of discussion, criticism, disagreements, and everything else is all done in the context of this really fun, even if at times spirited, collaboration that we have going on here. And I think that what we've been building together, as more clearly than ever for me before, evidenced by Rhiannon's wonderful scripts, really producing something which is cooler than any of us by ourselves could have come up with, I think. So this is all really fun, and I'm really glad to have you guys working with us on this. So, okay, but we are going to mercifully let everybody go now. So thanks everybody for joining us for this episode, and I will say, as always, thanks for listening and Godspeed. Although the theoretical budget of our hypothetical blockbuster may be unlimited, the production budgets of this and the rest of our fun alternative educational projects are unfortunately not. If you have enjoyed joining our production team, please consider donating at signumuniversity.org/fund.